Y'all, Turtleboy got assaulted by the McAlbert Mafia and Karen Reed's defense team rests. What the heck is going on in this trial? Hello, 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 and welcome to Alexa's Room, where we are not medical professionals, we are not lawyers, we are not law enforcement, we are just people who are extremely exhausted for being at the DMV all dang day and super excited to catch up on court today and share our opinions with you and understand how this system, how the law works a little bit better so we can make this world maybe a little bit better to live in. Who knows? I don't know. I'm exhausted. How about you? Um, so a lot has happened again while I was sitting in the DMV. I caught bits and pieces of the last of the defense witnesses. Not to my surprise, Karen Reed did not end up testifying. Spoiler alert. And honestly, I think we can all agree in the Karen Reed camp that no, she didn't need to get on the get on the stand at all. She didn't need to explain her side of the story because the Commonwealth did such a great job of proving this case should never have gotten to trial. So I don't think it would have helped. And I think she agreed with her lawyers too that it was okay for her to sit one back and just let, you know, the Commonwealth kind of destroy itself. And that's essentially what happens. Lally seemed a little bit more defeated today, especially when he was crossing the reconstruction specialists and even Dr. Sheridan. So we're going to go into his testimony first. That was the one that I caught the least of, and probably the longest testimony of the day. He's the pathologist. He gets into, again, just some of the injuries that John O'Keefe sustained. He talks about whether or not those injuries, the scratch marks, right, the abrasions, were, if they could have been caused by broken pieces of taillight just flying through the air and scratching him. He talks a little bit about the canine stuff, the bite marks, and then we go into Dr. Wolfe's testimony. He is the first reconstruction specialist, so he's not like the medical guy that is Dr. Rentschler. He gets more into the causation of that medical testimony later on. So we're going to get into all of it. But first and foremost, what the heck is going on with Turtleboy? Oh my goodness. If you guys have not been following this case extensively, or you're just joining in now, Turtleboy is a journalist. A lot of people call him a blogger. He is a blogger. He has a blog, but he's a journalist. And he has been covering this case very, very closely. And even so, I would say investigating it to a degree. He's been doing his homework for pretty much the beginning of this case, and he's become a big part of it. If you even listen to prior testimony from especially a lot of the witnesses, he calls them the McAlberts, so the McCabe's and the Albert family, and he was assaulted by not one but two McAlbert mafias, so mafiosos, yeah. So we're gonna get into that first because, like, what the heck, and then we'll go into court for the rest of the day. And then, yeah, tomorrow, guys, is closing arguments, and the judge says that it shouldn't be any longer than like an hour or two, so we'll see for an hour or two per team. So the defense gets an hour, the Commonwealth gets an hour, and then I think the Commonwealth gets to come back, home field advantage after the defense makes their closing argument. And then the evidence is all in for the jury to deliberate on, and we should have a verdict fairly quickly. I mean, I don't think any of us are anticipating a long deliberation or even, God forbid, a mistrial. I don't, or a hung jury. I don't see any of that happening. But you never know. This case is full of freaking surprises, including what the heck happened to Turtleboy. So let's start right there. Let's dive in. I have some clips. He actually went live last night. He recorded the whole thing in true Turtleboy fashion. Props to him. He was totally not in the wrong. Essentially, what happened, he was going to check out, so after Trooper Garino's testimony, and I'll link, I did a whole breakdown of Trooper Garino's testimony in my past 2 videos. I posted one earlier today and then one from last week, which is surprisingly getting a lot of traction. So thank you guys for watching my videos. I hope you enjoy. Where he was talking about how I forget which road it was. It might have been like not Oakdale Road. I grew up on Long Island, so Oakdale is a town there, but it was some kind of Oak Road by 34 Fairview. And he was saying, just based on the GPS location cell data from John O'Keefe's phone that he was looking through, the whole Apple Health data of the 3 flights of ascending and descending flights of stairs. He was trying to claim that this street is on a hill, so it could have been that, since the area of where John O'Keefe could have been was like, I forget, they said something like 2 miles or just like further, like a further distance away from the Albert residence. And Turtle Boy went to check it out and say, hey, like, is this street on a hill or is it not? Was he testifying to the truth? Turns out that was a lie. this road is not hilly at all. It's completely flat. So after doing that, him and his girlfriend went out for dinner at CJ McCarthy's. They were in Kenton. They went to a restaurant. They saw Jill Daniels. Excuse me, sorry, not Jill Daniels. She'll come up later. Don't worry. I think it was Julie Nagel. Yeah, Julie Nagel was at the bar restaurant as well. And if you guys again are new, so CJ McCarthy's, the significance of it is that was the first bar that John O'Keefe and Karen Reed were at before everybody moved to the Waterfall bar. So just to give some context, it's located in Canton. Okay, so Julie Nagel is sitting at the bar. She's filming Turtle Boy. He's like, okay, whatever. He like notices he is been charged with witness intimidation. She is one of those witnesses that he's allegedly intimidating. And he's like, I'm not gonna go up to her. I could ask her a million questions, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to make my situation worse. So he's enjoying his dinner, pays for his bill, walks out. And this is all the context that he gave during his live stream. I will link to that video in my description. I'm not going to play through it just because we have so much court testimony to go through today. And I want to keep this video as brief as possible, just to give you the utmost important clips from today's testimony, especially because I haven't seen all of it. So I will be reacting live in real time with you guys, which is exciting. And then, so yeah, he comes out with his girlfriend of CJ McCarthy's, and I think like a door or two down is D&E Pizza, which is Brian Albert's brother. Excuse me. His pizza place that he owns, Chris Albert Sr., from my understanding. Chris Albert Jr., there's a lot of juniors. There's like, I think there's a Brian Albert Jr. There's just a lot of weird juniors, and it's like, how narcissistic can you people be that you have to name your kids after yourself? Pick another name. There's plenty of great, strong names that would fit that towny personality of that masshole energy. So anyways, Chris Albert's, or first, excuse me, backtracking. First, they see Colin Albert. Colin Albert first instigates with Aiden Carney, Turtle Boy, by just like taking pictures, and he, this, that, and the third. He makes a couple of comments. Turtle Boy's like, hey, I'm just here to have dinner with my girlfriend. Like, there's nothing, I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to be in this town. I don't have a restraining order to not be in this town. I haven't been banned from any of these places. I can eat where I want. So that was the first of it. Then they were going to leave, go towards their car, right? And Chris Albert and like his gang of just, again, masshole goons come outside of the pizza place, and they just all starting with Turtle Boy. So that's pretty much the context of it. And then unbeknownst to me, I didn't even know who this other guy was. just again, there's a whole lot of, like, heavy Boston accents too, and it makes it's so laughable because it's just so ridiculous, and it's like, why? Like, you're all adults. Like, why? You're not making yourself look better, guys. So, he gets assaulted by this one guy, I think his name is Jim Davies. He works at the pizza place, and then later on, Jill Daniels pops onto the scene, like, rolls up in her car and gets out, like, parked in the middle of the frickin' street, like, doesn't even fully pull into like, she owns the frickin' place. She gets out of her car in a huff and a puff, and, if you guys aren't again, if you guys don't know the whole family tree, it's a little confusing. Jill Daniels, is the sister of Julie Albert. Julie Albert is Brian Albert's wife. So that is that connection. Jill Daniels is also good friends with, wait for it, wait for it, Courtney Proctor or Courtney Elberg or whatever her married name is now, some weird last name, who is Trooper Proctor's sister. So lots of like weird incestual type esque connections in this friend family mafioso group. So that's the background of everything. I'm gonna pull up first this article. So like, and the whole like the news, even NBC popped up on the scene to cover this. Like it was wild. Um, Recommend checking out the live stream for sure. So where am I? I'm here. Sorry guys, technology. Okay. I'm just gonna make myself small so I can actually see this. Okay, so this literally happened last night, guys. So Canton police confirmed on Monday, yeah, 2 Canton residents have been charged with assault and battery on Carney. So Aiden Carney, Turtle Boy, after Sunday's scuffle. They were identified as Jill Daniels and James Ferris. Sorry, James Ferris. So Jim Ferris. I thought it was like Jim Davies, something like that. But he's so that's how irrelevant this guy is. And you could just tell when you watch the video in a few minutes, like how pumped up these guys are to like be part of something. And it's just like that again, I keep saying this. I said this in my Proctor video too. It gives off like I peaked in high school energy. Like, and that is my identity. And I've never grown up. I've never done anything important with my life or significant. And it's so funny because they keep throwing around like you're a loser to Turtle Boy, and it's like, but I really think it's the other way around. So, they were charged with assault and battery. Um, as far as I know, there wasn't like any footage that I've seen of like them being cuffed and booked and all of that. Remember, we're still in Canton, so um, you know. But again, Daniels is also close friends with his sister, so Trooper Michael Proctor's sister, Courtney, which I am very surprised that she wasn't. I mean, I don't know. I guess it wasn't really that significant, but I was kinda surprised she was never called. I don't know if she was on the witness list because of all those texts between her and Proctor, especially in talking to, her buddy, I think Julie Albert, she was talking about, like, getting Proctor a gift and how proud she is of him handling the case and the investigation, blah, 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 because obviously it's in their favor. And yeah, so it was crazy. So we're gonna just pop into the clip. I have a couple of timestamps here that I want to play. Yeah, I even wrote down Jim Davies. I'm like, who the fuck is Jim Davies? I don't know. Okay, yeah, and like to be fair, like he's pissed. He's absolutely pissed, and I would be too because it's just so like disrespectful. So disrespectful and so unnecessary, and this all took place outside right outside the bar, like, on public streets. People are trying you can see in their videos, people trying to, like, even like this poor girl on like a crutch is trying to like get through, and it's like, get out of the way, dude. Like, stop. Just stop. And in front of your place of business too. But I'm gonna stop ranting. I'm gonna let you guys watch. I'll let Turtleboy tell the story.
Sober. Now imagine what they do to somebody who walks into a house on Fairview Road drunk, like, you know, John O'Keefe. And this is what happens.
So this is Jim Ferris. He's the guy who works at the pizza place that's like right next door.
So Jim Ferris then arrives. Notice there's Chris Albert filming, smiling. These are the same people.
Yeah, so this is Chris Albert Sr., I believe. And then this is the junior.
Who claim they're scared of me. And this is what Jim Ferris does. Watch him right here.
I wonder if he's gonna beat you too, like the other one. Look at that. Look. All the time.
That's when Jim Ferris hits the phone out of my hand. He assaulted me. So that's from my perspective. That's from my perspective. He hit the phone into the middle of the street. Didn't break, luckily. But that's clearly assault. He's being in charge of the phone.
It's like, I don't understand like what grown man would be like, yeah. This seems like, look at me, guys. Am I going to get a promotion because I smacked Turtleboy's phone out of his hand? Like, this dude, what he does for a living, he delivers pizza. Like, he's like a 50-year-old dude, like 45-year-old, whatever, middle-aged man, smokes cigarettes, whatever, delivers pizza for a living. But Turtleboy, who's a journalist and like is actually fighting for something he believes in and doing something productive in society, is the loser. Okay. So we could take.
And they're yelling something about that baby won't have a dad. Hold on one sec.
So we're gonna fast forward
From her camera.
Oh, this is from I think Meredith. So Turtleboy's girlfriend's camera. Oh, and note too, like there are other people there, like standing. This is in Canton, and there are more people standing behind Turtleboy filming for Turtleboy, like defending him. The guy who's not like a townie from here. He's not from here. There are more people defending him that are from Canton than defending these guys. So, like, what does that say? What does that say?
Notice that these are the people who are allegedly scared, sitting out here. Again, what was our crime? We came and we ate food at a restaurant. That's a crime. Can't do that.
That baby won't have a dad.
That baby won't have a dad. So this is the new nonsense that I won't even humor or feed into. I mean, we're dealing with children. They're like saying your baby's not going to have it. First of all, there's no baby. This is just nonsense. And our baby's not going to have a dad. He's a woman beater, all this shit. He's going to jail. They're mocking me. They think this is funny. They think this is funny. These are victims of witness intimidation, allegedly.
Look at that. Look.
Wow, we were just trying to leave and go to our cars. They're all coming up to us. Well, oh my God. Oh my God.
Like, and he brings up a good point. Like, do those look like people who are capable of getting in your face and starting a fight? Are those people who look scared? No. Especially when they have that gang mentality. Like, you don't see any of them one-on-one confronting him. They all have to go in a gang in a blob together. It's really childish. And it really gives off you peaked in high school. And even then, like, what did you peak at? Like, what were you peaking? Because I'm pretty sure that everybody in your town thinks you guys are a bunch of losers. So.
Oh, we have all of this on for the blog.
Yep.
Police right now. Let's see what happens.
Oh my
It's
God.
going to be great for the federal investigation, by the way, guys.
We got that on video, Jimmy.
Thank you. What's your name in case we need another witness to this?
Yeah. So again, like you see all these people coming out of the bar and they're like, yeah, Turtle Boy, like what the so that was the Jim Ferris assaults. And then we Jill Daniels rolls up. Like, this is insane how she rolls up. She looks like an actual crazy woman. And I'm not gonna play the whole stream, guys. You can check it out. Again, Turtle Boy has a lot of really great content if you're into this trial and you just want to learn more about the people, the players in Canton in this case involved, and just like digging up, like there's just mountains of dirt. Like these people have been just trying to get away with so much garbage in this town for years, and it's absolutely deplorable, and it makes me look at just like where I'm from, like and the people, the circles, the government, like it just makes me look at everything so differently and taking local government way, way more seriously. Everybody thinks about, and I guess because I'm like on this kick of I went to the DMV, I registered to vote in the new state I'm living in. And I haven't voted for like the presidential election for years because I just didn't feel like my voice was important. And what I've really discovered in following cases, especially this case too, is it's local government. Like if anything, if you really want to be heard, like that is the place. And I'm going to make more of an effort to participate in my local government here. Again, just helping me understand how everything works a lot better, because like there are crazy people out there. Like this is absolutely insane. And I'm not going to spend all episode going over this clip. You will watch it. You can watch it on your own time. I will link to it, and you can get the full story. But this is just insane. So this is when Jill Daniels rolls up.
Right? But he actually told the truth that John O'Keefe was not inside that car, nor was he outside that car, which means John O'Keefe
He's
was
talking
inside
about
that
Ryan
house.
Nagel. That's the guy in the red shirt.
What did I do? I fucking live in this town. No police still with this.
You hear that? So I live in this town. What did I do wrong? Like there are people who are angry who live in this town, and they're like, we're tired of being bullied by you people. And good for them.
Oh, here we go. Protection here. And then Jill, all of a sudden, we're gonna get this from a couple angles. This is when Jill Daniels arrived with somebody named Cynthia something. Somebody sent me the name Cynthia something. They sent me a name of this woman, and she, you'll see. You'll see what Jill Daniels does when she jumps out of the car.
Oh boy!
Oh, look who it is! Look who's here! Here she is.
You know what? I'm so sick of shit.
She stole my
But she
phone.
goes right for it.
I'm sick of your shit. Okay, enough is enough. You're a prick.
Can I have my phone?
How's the kid? He must be so proud of their dad.
That's assault, Joe.
That's assault.
I'm gonna need my phone back.
Fuck up, bird. You're a fucking bird. You look fatter than me.
I need my phone back.
Boom. You're fat.
I need my phone back, Joe.
You shut up. Where's your chocolate?
I'm gonna need my phone back, Joe.
And oh, I'm sorry. Did you go loopy? Did you go crazy?
Bill, can I please have
Shut
my
the fuck up. No one else.
phone back, please?
She's like a piranha.
Phone back, please, Joe.
Go ahead. Give me the phone.
I need my phone back, Joe. Don't you worry. I need my phone back. I need my phone back. Okay, so that just happened. That just happened. That just happened.
Piece of shit. I have wrinkles. I don't care, but guess what? I have a good heart.
You have a great heart.
Prick, you're going to jail, and I cannot wait. And guess what? You're going to be without a boyfriend because this prick is going to jail. I mean, I'll be with my boyfriend longer than you will. You're just going to die.
Okay, don't even worry about it. She's not worried. She's. This is a track. Just let her. Just let her talk. Just let her talk. Just let her talk. Just let her talk.
You're the one yelling right
Just
now.
let her talk. Don't even talk back. Don't even talk back.
I'm so sorry, but like Meredith just owned you, Jill Daniels. Like, so Jill Daniels is, and look, guys, I'm not in like the camp of let's attack people's looks. I'm not in the camp of that usually, but like, yeah, there are some people, like if you're gonna go low, like you gotta take the heat. Like people are gonna go lower, because if you are a piece of garbage, like I'm sorry, you do You do, in my opinion, you do deserve what's coming. You do. And if you're instigating it, and you're gonna act on a certain level, these people aren't instigating with you. You're coming at them and verbally assaulting them, and physically in this case too. So it looked like earlier originally, because this is from Turtleboy's phone, it looked like she was still like in an altercation with him from the movement of the phone, but she actually, like, I think she smacked it and like grabbed his phone and like walked away, like turned around, walked away with his phone. So like stolen property. Like what planet are you on, woman? Like, this isn't a movie. This isn't a movie. This is real life with real people. He's a father. He's a person. He's reporting on the news. What are you doing? Like, you look like a piranha. And again, I'm not like in the camp of like making fun, especially like women too. Like, I'm not here to drag you. I'm not here to drag you, but I'm gonna drag you if you deserve to be drugged. Drugged. So, and this girl looks like she's doing just like the way she like, it's so visceral. And again, it's like I'm showing you this, guys, because it gives you the full context of what these people are like. And these aren't even like the key the two people that assaulted him aren't even key players in this in the trial, in the case. These are like outliers who weren't even there, who just want to be a part of something. Like, you think she went home and she was probably proud of herself, like, yeah, like I freaking did that. Oh yeah, like this it's like that. I'm not gonna say it again, but it's that I peaked in high school, and I don't know what she would have peaked at as a burnout. Like, girl, like when you come at people like that, like, it doesn't make you look good. I'm sorry.
Don't even talk back. Don't even talk back.
And she's attacking
Who are
other
you
people
yelling
too.
at?
Who are you? Like, look at you. How many times you got punched in the nose?
I don't know.
Your teeth, you make fun of my teeth. Yours are shit.
No, it's mostly your skin, but okay. Yeah.
I don't care.
I mean,
I still have how many siblings do you have? Has anyone stuck up for you?
a bunch.
No, they don't like you.
They don't?
like you.
Okay, if you say so.
You guys can all tape me. Like, why are you taping
No,
me?
she's not dying. I can't imagine why. I can't imagine why anyone would want to tape you. Your behavior is normal. No one's harassing anyone. I'm just trying to eat dinner.
Why are you here?
Because I'm hungry. Because they serve food in here. Because I want food. Because when you're hungry, you eat food. I am. I'm just trying to eat food. Because I got assaulted by Jim Farris. We're walking out. Some people asked me to take pictures, and next thing you know, Jim Farris comes up to me and assaults me. You drove up here. Look at this shit. You're double parking. Because they killed John O'Keefe. Yes, they did. They obviously killed John O'Keefe. I was not there, but Colin was. I did not kill John O'Keefe.
Are you guys coming?
All right, like, we're gonna come. We'll see. I'm gonna. Oh, there she is. I mean, I can't believe this is real life. This is all just happening.
That's what I'm
I just go out to
saying.
dinner, and I can't even eat dinner. Now check this out from another angle.
Yeah, so this is
I'm
when
gonna
play
play
this
roll up.
part too,
This
guys.
is when she rolls up.
I think this is from Meredith's phone too, just so you can see because again, when I first saw it, I was like, oh my God, she's like really like attacking him, like it like animalistic. So again, it's just to show you guys like what these people are capable of. They're angry people. They're very hateful. If they don't like you, like you're out. Like they don't care. They don't care where you're from. They don't care who you are. They're taking you out. Then that's just like, and these people, they like run the town. Like some of them are, I think Turtleboy was saying like there's like selectmen or even the woman in the background too. She came attacking at. She's a resident of that town, a resident. And this woman, Jill Daniels, is calling her Big Bird. She's just filming. She's doing what she's legally allowed to do, is film. And you're calling her, so like you can't expect not to get insulted back. You're getting clapped back at. So this is from the other angle. Just I want you guys to see her walking away. It's just it's
So
insane.
this is not.
Oh, also too, I wanted to say like my favorite part with Turtleboy is when he's like, when you're hungry, you eat food, and I'm like, damn, like Joe Pesci would make a good Turtleboy. Like it's so good, and it's like funny, but it's not funny because it's just like it's actually terrifying.
This is her filming. This is what happened. I mean, dude, this was crazy, dude. So we are filming for our own protection here.
Oh boy.
Look who it is.
You are a fucking prick.
Here she is.
You know what? I'm so sick of your shit.
Look at that.
Oh my god.
Look at that shit.
Wow.
Like a wild animal. We are filming for our own protection here.
Oh boy.
Look who it is.
You are a fucking prick.
Here she is.
You know what? I'm so sick of your shit.
Yo, see that? Look how mad she is.
You know what? I'm so sick of your shit.
Look at that. There it is. See that, Jill?
She grabs
That's
it.
assault. So Jill Daniels and Jim Ferris, the police told, are both being charged with assault and battery for what they've done to us. That's a crime. That's a crime. They didn't get John O'Keefe on film. We got you on film. But imagine this is what they do on Main Street with people watching and filming. So now Jill Daniels is going to be charged with assault and battery. My assault and battery charge was dropped because it was fake. This is on film. This is real. You can't do that, Jill, just because you're angry and you can't control yourself.
Oh my god. Wow. Enough is enough. You're a prick. How's your kids? How's your kids? They must be so proud of their dad.
Yeah, they are.
Give him his phone back. Give him his phone back. You look fatter than me. Nobody cares. Give him his phone.
Yeah, she's normal. Look at me. I'm just chilling.
She's like unhinged.
Like, can I have my phone back?
What is
Can I have my
going
phone?
on?
I'm
I'm
still
still
live.
around.
I'm still live.
Give him his phone. You have his property. That's stuff. Give him his phone. Go ahead and
Look at it. She's walking away with his phone.
You can't steal his phone. Are you kidding me? There you go.
Throws it on the ground. And I'm still live. And I was still live.
Isn't that and that's pretty much the gist of it. The cops come a few minutes late, like the news crew rolls up, NBC 10, I think it is, Boston, they roll up. Like I think they roll up before the police did. But like you see her walk away with it, and I don't know if it was just Turtleboy saying it or if it was like actually some of the like Alberts who were like give him his phone back, because like you cannot walk away with that's stolen property. You can't do that. You're not like, and you're doing this in public. You think this is helping your family clear their name if they really are innocent, which we know they're not. Because when you behave a certain way, you're going to look a certain way. And the court of public opinion is not going to help. And guess what? In today's digital age, that lives on the internet forever. That lives, and like how are their partners, how are their family members proud of this behavior? How? So if you didn't think that these people were capable of murdering John O'Keefe, what do you think now? And these aren't even, again, the key players. These are the outliers. They weren't even there. So why are you so angry? Why are you so mad? This isn't going to make their case look better. There's a federal investigation going on. How does this help? How does this help when the defense just starts their case and now rested? Like, I mean, I can only imagine the defense got a hold of this too. And they're probably like, you know what? And not that the jury, obviously, they can't look at outside like media and they can't do any external research on their own in the off hours. They can only look at the evidence that's presented to them. And that's all they can base their opinions off of. But it's not going to help in any future cases. So I was so shocked. I was at the bar last night with my wife, and I was like, holy, what? What? So, anyways, that's enough of that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. We had something else too about but Jill Daniels has been up to stuff too. I mean, this is also from Turtleboy's blog. Again, highly encourage you check out his coverage on this case. No one goes deeper than him. I don't have the paid version, so don't mind the ads. I will subscribe though. So this is actually from a few months ago. Canton cover up part 335. Jill Daniels accidentally doxes herself on Bile Twitter account after failing to crop out picture of her dog in a screenshot used to attack Karen Reed's dad. So, like, there's a bunch of hate Twitter accounts. I mean, I understand the purpose of Twitter. It's a really great place to get a lot of, like, live in real time updates, and I will be on it eventually. It's just, like, it's Wild West out there, and I am slightly terrified of being on there. But you also see stuff like this. So this is, again, our girl Jill. And you just see, like, the crazy okay, like, I'm just gonna say, like, I have fallen for women like that before, like the crazy not that, but like the crazy eye look. And like at first you think, wow, like they're just like staring into my soul, like it's just intense, like they're just really like passionate people. And then you realize like no, they're staring at you like that because they're unhinged. And like it's terrifying. Like the lying, the manipulation, it's absolutely terrifying. And she got the crazy eyes. So just quickly going through this because I thought it was interesting. Like she's been up to this stuff. This was a tweet that was put out by this. Obviously, people pieced together that it's her running this account. It's not just some random person, which makes sense. I feel like all of these accounts are probably run by people of the McAlbert Mafia, as Turtleboy says. But Karen's dad, I would never put my father through this. He has deteriorated. He knows. Sorry, y'all. He knows she's guilty. She may not have a heart for the O'Keefe family and the family she lied about, but at least she should have compassion for her dad. Okay, so that's the tweet. That's the picture. This is a zoomed in part. So she, I guess, took a screenshot of something. Because at first I was like, I'm not understanding. But I think. So they scroll through, right? And they zoom in. And that was her dog. So just want to get out of this. That's a picture of her dog. So she's running hate accounts, hate Karen Reed accounts. So they're like, if that dog looks familiar, it's because that dog was in Jill's car. So this is the dog. And then again, just scrolling back up to this photo. Same dog. So she's literally been doing this 4 months. And it's funny when people dox themselves. So I just thought I would share that and also give Aiden Carney a plug because he's awesome. And yeah, justice for John O'Keefe, free Turtleboy. Anyways, so let's get into court. What do you guys say? We're gonna start with the defense. The defense's first witness. This is Dr. Sheridan. I gotta go back. What was the timestamp I had? 23:07. Yeah, so I missed a lot of this. He didn't participate in voir dire day. He was not. I think that they were going to voir dire him. I don't know if they did earlier in this day. But I don't think they did. So in terms of like background information, this was the first time that I was learning about it. But this dude, he performed something of like, he said between 12,000 and 15,000 autopsies in his career. So again, just another badass. And when you look at the backgrounds and the CVs, of the defense witnesses and experts and compare them to the Commonwealth's, who are you going to find more credible? Who are you going to listen to more? You know, the Harvard graduate, I'm not saying he's from Harvard. I actually don't know where he, I missed that part of the testimony. But I picked up on he conducted 12,000 to 15,000 autopsy. Like that's an insane amount of experience. Like compared to, yeah, and I can't even like knock really the medical examiner on the Commonwealth side because she did the right thing. She told the truth. She did. She said anything's possible. Like all of these, it could have been from this, it could have been from that. Not what the Commonwealth is supposed to be proving. So we're going to get into his testimony. He's going to talk about, primarily what I'm going to focus on is the scratch marks on John O'Keefe's arms. So whether that was potentially caused by taillights, pieces flying in the air and scratching him up, or if they look potentially consistent with dog bite marks. And then we're going to get into, I believe also, because he's a pathologist, so also like the injuries with the brain, and with the back of the head, the skull. So he's going to get into all that sciencey stuff. He sounds very much like an actor. I don't know, like some kind of like almost like Anthony Hopkins-esque actor. He has a very enchanting accent that's also like kind of dark and like mysterious. But like you listen to him and you're like, this is definitely a professor. And he is also a professor. He still teaches. He's retired, but he still teaches. And he just said, like, you just sound like a smart human. So we're going to get into his testimony right now.
Photographs of the vehicle that was allegedly involved in his death.
Okay, so
photographs of
right now he's talking about what the defense gave him to review. I'm going to back it up a little bit, but he is a little slow speaking. He's a little hard to understand at times. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit. I might speed it up a little bit more. I might have to connect some dots. I might even put in subtitles. Yep. Just so you don't miss anything, but I'm going to back it up and we will get, okay. Yeah. We'll get a little bit into his background. The coroner's office, San Bernardino County.
Responsibilities. Fortunately, not too many, because there were other people to do it. But most of my responsibility there was supervising the medical part of the coroner's office. In other words, the autopsy section. And I was supervising other pathologists, but I was also working full-time doing autopsies myself. So I spent most of my time actually performing autopsies. But I did have, as I said, administrative roles and the role of supervising colleagues.
Again, very similar to Dr.
As a medical examiner, as a forensic pathologist, I frequently had to testify in court, rather like I'm doing now. So that was another part of my duty.
And during the course of your professional experience, approximately how many autopsies do you believe you've conducted?
It's between 12 and 13,000. I think it's closer to 13,000.
13,000, sorry. I said
and have you qualified as an
15,000.
expert in the areas of forensic pathology, neuropathology, and anatomic?
In courts, yes. Yes, well over 400 times.
Over 400 times has testified.
Over 400.
And did you review materials related to this case
Yeah.
in furtherance of coming to an opinion and conclusion about Mr. O'Keefe's injuries?
And if you're wondering who that small voice is in the background, that is Miss Little. She is part of the defense team. She handled the direct examination of cross brain. What is it? Cross examination of Dr. Scoribello. So that is the medical examiner for the Commonwealth. That's why they likely had her doing this. It makes sense.
Yes, I did. I reviewed quite a lot of materials.
What did you review?
Okay, I reviewed the autopsy report on this case. Along with that, there was the neuropathology report, which was separate. There was a toxicology report. There were autopsy photographs. These were all of primary importance to me, all these things. Then I also reviewed the complaint in this case, outlining, in other words, the basic details of the case. I reviewed photographs taken at the scene of death of Mr. O'Keefe, photographs of the vehicle that was allegedly involved in his death, photographs of the decedent himself before the autopsy, while he was at the hospital, at Good Samaritan Hospital. Then there was also some videos of the scene of death. I also saw the death certificate, a document by CERT, S-E-R-T.
That's
reports.
the search and rescue team that came back. I'm going to speed them up a little bit. Whoa, not that fast. Not that fast. That is the search and rescue team that did the secondary search after the police did the first initial search on January 29th.
From Canton Police Department. Am I missing anything out? I don't think so. Yeah.
Your Honor, permission to publish what's been previously marked as Exhibit 19.
Sure.
Dr. Sheridan, is this one of the photographs that you reviewed in reaching your opinions and conclusions in this case?
Yes, it is.
Could you describe the injuries that you see in this photograph?
These injuries that you're looking at here on the arm are abrasions, which are friction injuries, basically. We classify them under the general category of blunt force injury, but these particular ones are abrasions. Abrasions being where the outer layer of the skin, the epidermis as it's called, has been scraped off. These are friction injuries, essentially.
And based on your review of the information discussed earlier, can you tell, as well as your review of these photographs, can you tell whether these injuries were sustained before or after death?
These injuries were sustained before death. We call them ante-mortem, A-N-T-E, mortem meaning before death. And that's based primarily on their color. And you have to take other things into consideration, but that's the basics of it. If these had been post-mortem, they would have a more yellowish, orange color.
So that kind of helped clarifies things from Dr. Russell's testimony. If you guys haven't checked out that video, I covered her entire testimony. We also heard her talk a little bit about what she would be talking about during the Voir dire Day video, if you saw that. So you already got a taste of her testimony. But I believe when Lally was crossing her, he was trying to pretty much pull this exact answer out of Dr. Russell and say, well, do you know if these wounds were sustained or these abrasions? So he's saying abrasions. So, okay, like that's what they are. Okay, cool. I buy into it. If they were post-mortem or if they were, I forget what the exact term was, but before death. So he just confirmed for us, whereas she did not know. She wasn't able to say whether or not she knew if those were, if you could determine. She said you could, but she would need a little bit more information. But he knows, so he would be the guy to say yes, that is post-mortem, that is before death.
Usually yellow.
In your professional opinion, based on a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, are those injuries consistent with being struck by a vehicle while holding a drinking glass?
Objection.
Sustained.
May we approach, Your Honor?
Sure.
So they're gonna approach. We'll zip through.
I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you again to keep your voice up, please, sir.
I'm doing my best. My voice is not as strong as it used
There
to
we
be.
go. We'll stop the AC for a while then. We'll stop the air conditioning for a while then. We want to make sure we hear you.
Dr. Sheridan, are these injuries consistent with a motor vehicle accident, in your opinion?
Sustained.
I would say in general, no. I think,
So that objection was sustained. I think Ms. Little's going to put it to you in a different way.
I'm sorry.
If you could assume, for purposes of this question, that this individual was involved in a motor vehicle collision as a pedestrian, based on your review of his photographs, Are those injuries consistent with having been struck by a vehicle?
Objection.
Sustained, why don't you come back for a minute?
So she tried asking it a different way. She pretty much asked it the same way. I guess he can't testify to anything specifically about it being car related, but like again, it doesn't make sense. It's like, well, then like, how can the defense possibly rebut that? Like,
Dr. Sheridan, how many autopsies have you conducted on individuals who were involved in pedestrian vehicle motor collisions?
Involved in what pedestrian vehicle? Of course, yeah. Well over 100.
What other experience do you have in terms of conducting autopsies with individuals who have been involved in motor vehicle collisions?
Well, I mean, if you take motor vehicle accidents in general, they'd be probably nearly a quarter of my total number of autopsies. So in other words, that'd be close to 3,000. Yeah, that's about right.
wow.
Based on your professional experience, what is your opinion regarding whether those injuries are consistent with a pedestrian being struck by a motor vehicle?
Objection.
I'm going to allow it. You can answer that, Doctor.
Hmm?
Can you answer that?
I can answer it, yes.
So go right ahead.
Okay. Okay. The question was, to be precise, can you just rephrase it? I mean, I said yes, I can answer it, but I can't remember exactly how you phrased it.
Yes, based on your extensive training and experience, what is your opinion regarding whether those injuries are consistent with an individual being struck by a vehicle?
If you mean struck in that part of the body, on the arm, like
Yes.
directly, I would say no, it doesn't look like that at all.
And can you explain that?
Well, if you're hit by a vehicle, or whichever part of your body is hit, if it's a significant impact at all, you're going to get bruising. And we don't have any bruising here. We just have what I would call linear abrasions without any bruising. So that does not look to me at all remotely like an impact from a motor vehicle.
What would you expect to see?
Can we get a mic drop? Like, yeah. Like, where's the bruising? Where's the bruising at all? Like, if not the rest of the body, if not the ribs, if not the if not anything else, if not the knee, even the kneecaps too, as this was brought up. I don't know if it was during his testimony or somebody else's testimony. It might have been. I think it was actually Scory Bellows. Is like it like in some cases where there is an accident involving a motor vehicle and a pedestrian, like if the bumper is low enough, it can hit the kneecap and there can be like injuries to the kneecap, bruising, etc. Or Karen Reed's car is because she's driving a Lexus SUV, some kind of big tank of a SUV. The bumper, I think, was slightly higher. And also consider John O'Keefe was 6'2". So you have to take all those varying factors as well too, of where any possible injuries could have been too. So
If an individual's arm were struck by the rear of a motor vehicle?
Well, as I just said a second ago, primarily a lot of bruising, and that's what we don't see here. You might see, well, depending on the circumstances, you might see other things like a fracture or fractures, but you would at least expect bruising.
In your professional opinion, based on your many years of experience, have you conducted any autopsies involving individuals who were involved in any sort of animal attack?
Animal attacks in general, yes, quite a few.
So now, notice how she leads with that. She leads with the Commonwealth's theory, debunks that, and like he didn't even hesitate. He didn't say, "Oh, it's a possibility." He said, "No, that's not what that looks like." Period. Case closed. End of story. Cool. Moving on. Does it look consistent with an animal attack? So you see how she's going through her line of questioning, and it's so smart. And she does like just the defense too. And call me biased, I don't care. But like their line of questioning and the way that they just ordered the events, it just makes sense in my brain to, okay, first we got this, cool. Now this is the next question. We're going to hit this thing. Cool. Now we're going to hit this thing. Whereas Lally, I feel like he jumps around way too much. And half the time he's mumbling and you don't understand what question, or like he doesn't even know what question he's trying to ask. And even Miss she had only done the one cross examination, and she's also doing this as well too, this direct examination of this witness. Obviously a newer attorney, so getting her reps in, or a newer in the sense of court experience, and she's killing it. She's doing a great job. So maybe Lally needs a few more practice runs. I don't know.
Actually, well, when I say quite a few, it's not an enormously common event, but I've done probably at least a dozen or so involving deaths where an animal was involved one way or another.
Have you conducted any autopsies in which any individual was attacked by a dog?
Yes, I have a few.
Can you describe that?
Well, I'd have to just refresh my memory out of the blue here. But first of all, I had a number of cases, 3 or 4, I think, over the years involving children. It was primarily children who were killed by feral dogs, and the dogs attacked the kid and killed them. So I had that a few times. But then I've also had cases where an animal or a dog particularly was involved, but wasn't the actual cause of death, so to speak. But they were involved in something that was happening and left some traces of their activity in the form of bite marks or scratch marks.
Which is interesting because, again, that's not necessarily what the defense's theory is either. They're not saying John O'Keefe was killed by Chloe the dog. They're saying that in some way it seems like a dog that could have been like Chloe or could have been Chloe at some point attacked John O'Keefe as a possibility. Was that the cause of death? I don't think the defense is saying that, but it definitely looks like there was some kind of involvement there.
In your professional opinion, are those injuries consistent with an animal attack?
Are they consistent with what?
An animal attack.
I would say they are, yes. I'm not 100% sure about this, but my initial reaction when I saw this photograph was that it was probably an animal mark, and most likely I would say a dog. Scrape marks with the paws, and possibly also a bite mark from the teeth as well. Possibly. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't get a chance to analyze it right there on the spot, so to speak. But my basic impression is that these are consistent with marks caused by, say, a dog using his paws or claws, if you want to put it that way, and possibly the teeth as well.
Exactly what Dr. Murray, the dog expert, the dog bite expert / whisperer, testified to as well.
If there's a pointer up there, would it be possible to direct the jury to the injuries that you're referring to on the screen? There should be a little laser pointer up there, I believe.
I don't know that I see one.
He's just also adorable.
It's not there.
Oh.
May I approach you? Sure.
Okay.
Using the laser pointer, do you indicate the injuries that you just testified are consistent with scratch marks?
Actually, in a sense, they're all consistent with scratch marks in the sort of more generic sense of whether it's the paws or the teeth, they're going across the skin rather than going straight into it. So they're all of these marks are generally consistent with, if you want to call them scratch marks. So I don't know if this will work on the screen, but you basically got what looks like there's one pair there with possibly a third one in the middle. There are 2 very clear parallel marks there with another one fainter in the center. Then you have, going closer to the elbow, you've got another 2 or 3, whichever way you look at that. But at the elbow itself, you have, that part of the elbow there is what I would think is the most likely candidate here for a bite mark, because it has something of the configuration of the outline of teeth. And then the ones on the forearm are a little bit less obvious, but they're still consistent in general with, I would say, claw marks or maybe from the teeth.
Dr. Sheridan, if you assume that the decedent was standing with his arm extended in this manner, and he was struck with the rear taillight of a 7,000-pound Lexus.
I wish they would have panned over, the camera guy would have panned over to Miss Little, because what she's doing is she's reenacting, which is brilliant. She's reenacting what Trooper Paul testified to, that, and I'm just going to minimize him for a second. John O'Keefe holding his arm, I'm going to do the other arm so you guys can see clear. Holding his arm like this with the glass in his hand from, I think, C.J. McCarthy's or the Waterfall Bar, one of the two. I don't know why they're so obsessed with the glass cup. Like, I really don't know what that proves. The glass didn't even matter. Anyways, I digress. Let's focus, kids. He's holding the glass, or could have been holding the glass, when he was struck by Karen Reed's vehicle. And that could have also been the cause of the scratch marks / abrasions on his arm. So this is the arm movement she's referring to. So
only on with his arm,
or maybe from the teeth.
We're just going to back it up so you can hear the full question.
If you assume that the decedent was standing with his arm extended in this manner, and he was struck with the rear taillight of a 7,000-pound Lexus only on the arm, such that it spun him around and propelled him 30 feet. Do you have an opinion as to whether or not these arm injuries are consistent with that scenario?
Objection.
All right, I'll see you inside that.
So he can't answer that, but it's a good question. Is it going to come through? Is the judge going to allow her to ask that question? I don't believe she does. But it's a good, because again, it just ties everything perfectly together, and it just proves, like, how ridiculous Trooper Paul's testimony was. So we're still in it's a long sidebar. Even for 1.5.
All right, please.
Oh, okay. So I think this is when they go on their break. Yep. Okay, so that's when they go on their break. We're gonna skip the spinny fan because we're watching this later. Woot. We're back from the fan.
Muted.
We are unmuted. So we'll see where Miss Little picks up.
I'll look at this.
Oh, we're muted again. Jimmy, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Jimmy? Jimmy, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Jimmy? I'm like overtired, and I think that's why I have all this.
You are
What are
unmuted.
they? They're rising. They are sitting. What are they doing in this courtroom? Okay, we're back. We're back to sitting, y'all.
All right, go right ahead, Miss Little, in a loud voice.
Thank you. And Dr. Sheridan, I'll ask you to also just keep your voice up for this question.
I'll try.
She's just like, she's charming. He's charming. Like even the judge, like you can tell she definitely prefers Miss Little over Gennady and Jackson.
Soon the decedent was standing with his arm outstretched like this and was struck by the rear.
Woo! So she got the question in, y'all. She got the question, and this is a great question too, because again, it just ties the ridiculousness of Trooper Paul's testimony.
The SUV, only in his arm at 24 miles per hour. Are the injuries in Exhibit 19 consistent with that scenario?
No, I do not think so.
Can you describe that?
Well, as I think I've already mentioned before, one thing that's not there, that should be there, given that idea, that scenario, is there should be bruising, at least bruising, if not perhaps even more than that, but bruising for sure. Secondly, just the appearance of these injuries, their pattern, if you want to just call it that, the way they're distributed doesn't seem to fit the idea of the rear of a vehicle being the impacting object.
And at 24 miles per hour, would you expect to see fractures or breaks in the arm?
It could do. There'd be other factors involved as to depending. It depends on a lot of things, but it's possible. Yeah.
I'd like to direct your attention to the injury that Mr. O'Keefe sustained to his head. Do you recall that injury?
To the
Now
head.
she's getting into
Yes.
that.
Yes. Mhm.
So again, it's like you don't even need to like skip past, like, you know, navigate. Okay, this is a key part because she does a great job of just getting to what we need to know. We need to know a little bit about his background, what his resume looks like to show his credibility, and then from there, just hit him with the questions. Hit him with the questions. We don't need to get into all these little unrelevant detail just so you can run out the clock. So she does a great job of just quickly pivoting. Now we're talking about the head injuries.
Could you describe that injury for the jury?
Well, there were a few minor injuries on the face, but the major injury, and indeed the main cause of death, was an impact to the back of the head, slightly to the right of the midline of the back of the head, and where there was a laceration. A laceration is another type of blunt force trauma, but this is a laceration is where the skin is actually opened up or split, so you get bleeding from a laceration. So there was a laceration, as I said, in the back of the scalp, in what's called the occipital area, and beneath that, when the skin was moved away as part of the autopsy, there was extensive bruising, hemorrhage in other words, in the scalp at that same point. There was a fracture that started at that point in the skull, but traveled all the way forward to the frontal areas of the skull. So you have the impact. The impact site is clear because, as I said, you've got the laceration. That's where the impact was. So you have the impact with the scalp hemorrhage there and the skull fractures. Then the brain itself. It had injuries, significant injuries. First of all, there was bleeding on the surface of the brain, and that's very common in situations like this. But in addition to that, there were extensive bruises. Contusions is the real word, actually, but they are essentially bruises of the brain substance itself, and that they were in several different parts of the brain, including the frontal areas, which are near the forehead, and also the temporal, which are towards the side, more or less. And then there was also hemorrhage deep inside the brain, in the ventricles, which are open areas in the center of the brain. All of these things were described in the neuropathology report, and you can see them in the photographs that were part of the neuropathology report as well as the autopsy. As a result of, I should say, the injury to the brain began to swell, and that's what it usually does after major trauma. And as a result of the swelling, you had what's called herniation, where the brain if you want to think of it this way, the brain is trying to expand, but it can't because the skull is around it. So it begins to put pressure, pushing, especially down.
Which I do recall the brain expert who briefly testified. She didn't even get crossed. She just was on direct. Essentially what she said, there was swelling. Exactly how he just said it. So
Downwards towards the top of the spinal cord. And eventually, as happened in this case, it's quite clear from the photographs, the brain herniated downwards, the brainstem particularly herniated downwards, and this would have been the final straw, so to speak. That's what would lead to respiratory failure and death. So this was a fatal injury.
So this was the fatal injury, is whatever caused his brain to swell that much and expand and crush his skull and snap the spinal cord. That is what stopped his breathing. That is what caused his death. Okay.
Sir.
And what impacts would that type of injury have had on the individual after sustaining it?
Yeah, once this injury occurred, once this impact occurred, Mr. O'Keefe would have been unconscious. He would still be capable of breathing for a while until that brain swelling took over and pushed the brainstem down. But he would immediately from the point of impact, he would have been unconscious for sure.
He had been able to stand up, move, and walk?
No, he would have been unconscious completely.
Do you have any opinion regarding whether that injury is consistent with having been struck on the ground on dirt or grass?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
I'll rephrase it. That was a poorly worded question. Is that injury consistent with striking dirt or grass?
Like, for example, falling onto grass?
Yes.
No, I don't think so. If there's a fall involved here, and there could be, it would be onto a hard surface. But the grass, and as I understand from all the material I reviewed, there was also some snow, and so that might even cushion the impact even a little bit more. But even without the snow, grass is basically too soft for somebody falling and hitting their head on it to get the injuries I've just described.
Because the Commonwealth was trying to essentially say, I forget who exactly was trying to testify to this. There's been so many doofuses on the freaking witness stand, it's hard to keep track. I'll keep better notes for the Baldwin case for sure, and the Adelson case. But what the Commonwealth was trying to present as like a possibility was that he got these injuries from the impact. So after getting hit by the car, getting projected, whatever again that means, whether he was flying through the air, he spun, he was put, we still don't know what that means, what they mean by projected. And John O'Keefe hit his head so hard against the snow, that the snowy ground, because the ground was, I guess, too icy at that point. I mean, it was very cold, and I could believe it. Icy ground is definitely going to be a slightly harder surface, but it's not going to be like concrete, like slamming your head against a wall or something, or like, again, concrete. So I'm actually surprised they didn't call in like a grass expert or anything like that. Because I actually think they did, not in the actual trial, I don't think, but I believe maybe in one of the later trials of the Adnan Syed case with Heyman Lee's car and like how long her car was sitting in that lot. If I'm remembering that correctly, I believe I saw that in the documentary. They had like a grass expert because they wanted to see, again, like how long was her car there with the sun exposure? Like, was it moved here recently? Would it have been to have killed this like patch of grass that the car was resting over, etc.? That from what I can remember. Let me know if you guys have seen that documentary too, and you know what I'm talking about. But I'm surprised that in this case they didn't call a similar witness to be like, yes, like when the grass there's snow on the ground and it's below freezing, it turns to ice, like ice rink ice, like concrete solidness that can cause that kind of no. So he just said no. Grass is still too soft. And if anything, the snow could have helped cushion the potential blow. So
In addition to focusing on the injuries that were present, what significance do you place on the absence of injuries in conducting an autopsy?
What significance do I place on what?
In addition to focusing on the injuries that are present, what significance do you place on the absence of injuries when conducting an autopsy?
Well, as you put it there, it's a rather general question, but I mean, when you're doing an autopsy, you obviously want to see what is there and what's not, and everything can be relevant, including absent things. Now, in this particular case, there are a number of features of things that are absent that are important. I've already alluded to one, and that is on the arm. If that
No
was an impact from the
bruises.
vehicle, I would expect bruising. But do you want me to continue?
Yes.
Yeah. But if
Yes, please.
if Mr. O'Keefe was struck with it depends obviously what part of the body is theoretically involved. But if a vehicle hits you, whether it's the back of the vehicle or the front, you're going to have, as long as it's not going extremely slowly, if it's going at any speed at all, any significant speed, it's going to cause at least bruising. And that in this particular case, one of the things that struck me was that there was a distinct absence of bruising on the torso. There was the chest, abdomen, hips, whatever, and also. In most cases that I've ever been involved in where a pedestrian was hit by a vehicle, there are injuries on the legs, including fractures, which are very common on the legs. So the absence of all of these things in this case, I think, is important.
Have you conducted autopsies involving individuals who are involved in fights or altercations?
Yes, many, many times.
Approximately how many?
Gosh, I have no idea, and it's a lot. I mean, I've done. I said earlier that between over 12, maybe 13,000 total autopsies. Of those. I'm only giving you estimates here, but over 1,000 would have been homicides. Of those, probably maybe a fifth, so about 200, would have involved blunt force trauma instead of, for example, a firearm or something like that. And in those cases, and of course, so all of those, and other cases involving sharp force, homicides involving sharp force may have evidence of a struggle as well. So it's in the hundreds, yeah.
In your expert medical opinion, are Mr. O'Keefe's injuries consistent with a fight or a physical altercation?
In a general sense, they can be. They could be, yes. He had, I alluded to it just briefly before, but the head injury, the major head injury I've described, but he also had a laceration over his right eyelid. He had some scrape marks on his face. He also had some bruises on the back of his right hand, which that kind of injury on the hands can be what we call a defensive injury. In other words, an injury that occurs when you're protecting yourself and you're hit in the.
Just like Dr. Scoribello also testified to. She said, yes, that could be a defensive wound because Miss Little also asked her to debunk this if there was any, because those bruises could also be caused by an IV being inserted there. So Miss Little asked, like, okay, so where did you find any IVs that were hooked up to his hand? There were not. They were not hooked up to his right hand. So what could have caused that bruise? And there's no bruise on his other hand, on his left hand. So why would he have one bruise other than the obvious? He likely threw a punch. He likely made contact. And maybe that's the only shot he got. What do you guys think?
He hit either with another fist or with a hard object, and you're protecting yourself. So I would say that some of these findings I've just mentioned are consistent with the possibility of a physical altercation, yes.
Thank you. If I could have one moment.
Sure.
Okay, so we're gonna. So yeah, no further questions. I think that was excellent. I mean, that was pretty much the entire direct examination, and that took like what, 30 minutes? Like that's how you do it. So then Lally hits it. I think I have a timestamp for Lally. Oh no, for Rentschler I do. The reconstruction specialist. So we're gonna get into a little bit of cross. We'll give Lally an opportunity to ask him some questions because I am curious. I didn't see any of his cross, so I'm just curious.
Yes.
And understandable, but this isn't an autopsy you performed yourself, correct?
I did not perform myself, no.
You never saw the body, you're looking at photographs and reports, correct?
Yeah, I'm going by the photographs and the autopsy report, yes.
And contained within the materials that you reviewed, did you ever look at Mr. O'Keefe's medical records from the Good Samaritan?
Look at whose medical records, Mr. O'Keefe's?
Yes.
I looked at the medical records from Good Samaritan Hospital where he was pronounced dead, yes.
Okay, so you did look at those as well?
I did look at those. Yeah, I thought I mentioned it earlier. Maybe I forgot.
Now, with regard to what you reviewed of Mr. O'Keefe's injuries, you saw no injuries to his left arm, correct?
To his left arm? No, I don't think so. No.
No injuries to his left leg, correct?
No.
Injuries to his torso that you saw?
That's correct.
And no injuries to the back left side of his head, is that correct as well?
That's correct, yes.
Now, you indicated that you observed or reviewed the autopsy reports as well as
that's
autopsy
actually
photographs and
interesting too. So he had no injuries to the left side. So then again, if you're I guess that kind of supports their theory in a weird way of him being allegedly sideswiped, and that's how he was projected 30 feet. Anyways, but I guess so that's why he would only have injuries on one side of his head versus the other side. But for me, that just more sounds like you were hit from the back of the head by something, or you were hit from the front, smacked your head, goes back, maybe a certain, I don't know. Or somebody smacks you when you're already down on that side. I don't know, but that's more of what it sounds like to me.
correct?
I did, yes.
Now, do you agree with Dr. Scortibello's determination as to the cause of death being multiple blunt force type injuries in conjunction with hypothermia?
I do agree with that, yes.
And you reviewed also the neuropathology report by Dr. Stonebridge?
I did, yes.
And you agree or concur
That's
with
the brain
findings
doctor.
Dr. Stonebridge contained within that report?
Yes, there were photographs taken during the neuropathology examination, which were independent confirmation for me of the things described in the report. Yes.
Now, with regard to autopsies that you performed in the past, well, let me ask you this first. As far as the injuries that you observed in the photographs to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, they were not the cause of Mr. O'Keefe's death, correct?
No, they were not. Mm-hmm.
With regard to autopsies that you performed in the past, in regard to there being some sort of animal involved, as you were testifying before, is it normal to see just injuries related to an animal attack on just one portion of one piece of body?
This is the same exact question he asked Dr. Murray Russell the other day in so many words. He asked, well, essentially, why would the dog only attack one side of John O'Keefe versus the entire? I mean, I feel like that's kind of like okay. Like, I don't know. It's like the same thing I was saying in my last video of, like, why are mosquitoes attracted? Like, sometimes I get bit up on one side of my leg or my arm or my ankles or whatever, or even sometimes like my face, my neck, than the other side. And I don't know. I know it's like something to do with like what you eat and like the different stuff in your blood. That's what attracts them, or I don't know. I'm not a mosquito expert, guys, but but I've been bitten plenty of times. So I don't, it's, again, like, as normal people who could be potentially sitting in the jury box, like, I just don't know, like, how significant this is, but we'll let him ask the question and answer.
Yes, in a general way. I mean, as I mentioned, I think when I was answering the question about the cases I've done involving animals, I tried to divide them into two groups because there's an important difference. Some of those cases were cases where the animals were responsible for the death itself. As I said, a bunch of feral dogs in one case, particularly, I remember another was a case where it wasn't a whole bunch of them, but there were two dogs, large dogs, and they killed the victims, children. So those individuals had multiple injuries, including deep bite marks that were fatal, particularly in the neck area. But they also had, and I'm stretching my memory a bit because it's a while since I did these cases, but I do have a general recollection that in those cases, I should say, in addition to the fatal injuries, there were also some non-fatal, sort of things like paw marks. And I can't remember the distribution though on the body.
Can you remember, as far as whether or not these injuries that you observed, and not taking the child fatalities with the dog's maul, I'm presuming that those involve injuries to significant and extensive parts of the body. Is that correct?
Yeah, those are the ones where the animals caused the death, yes. Mm-hmm.
So in the other instances that you were talking about, do you recall even whether or not those injuries that you observed were ante-mortem or post-mortem?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
The other ones that you were talking about as far as the other animal attacks that you've seen,
yeah.
Do you recall whether or not the injuries that you observed in those instances were ante-mortem or post-mortem?
Oh, ante-mortem. Well, actually, in one of the cases that comes to mind, the marks appeared to be post-mortem, and that was this person was actually a homicide victim, and they were lying outdoors, and their own dog. This was according to police, though, who came on the scene. When they arrived, there was a dog that turned out to be the victim's own dog, was pawing at the body, and the person was dead. But in another case that I can think of, the scratch marks from dog paws were antemortem, and they were confined to one place only. I'm trying to remember what part of the body. This case, I had to testify later on. In this case that I'm thinking of now, the paw marks were limited to just one location. I can't remember exactly whether it was the leg or the arm. I can't remember.
And that was post-mortem injuries that you're talking about there, correct?
No, in the second case, they were antemortem. So in other words, there's been post-mortem and antemortem, yes.
So
Injuries
like
that you observed on Mr. O'Keefe's arm, which is the posterior
So
part.
like in this case, that's not the answer Lally wanted. Like in this case, where the paw marks were all in just one direction, one place, right? And they were antemortem. That is the word, antemortem, not postmortem. And in the case that he was just talking about too, where the dog was pawing at his owner, I mean, that was probably like out of like oh my God, like what's wrong? Wake up. That kind of that's what I can only speculate, but that's not the relationship John O'Keefe had with Chloe. I can tell you that. Like, I think anybody can tell you that.
Of his arm, correct?
Yes, basically, the posterior.
No injuries that you observed on the anterior portion or the other side of the right arm, correct?
That's correct, yes.
No other injuries that you observed consistent with what you're talking about as far as an animal attack on any other part of Mr. O'Keefe's body, correct?
That's correct, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And from what you observed in the reports and the photographs, you can't say definitively what type of animal, correct?
That's correct, I can't.
And you can't say even if it was an animal or was a dog, what breed of dog that was. Is that correct?
No, but if I had to try, and if I said it,
Not asking you to try, so I'm just asking whether or not you can say whether or not that what breed of dog it was.
no, I can't anymore.
Yeah, he on cross-examination, it's yes or no. You can explain on redirect. So I'll get a chance to explain.
What breed? No.
You can't say whether or not those injuries were inflicted inside a house or outside of a house. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have no idea. Mm-hmm.
You can't say when they occurred, correct?
Only that they were when he was still alive. Yeah, but other than that, no. And then they are fresh looking. I mean, this is generally so they look like they happened very shortly before death.
And when you say short time, you're talking about hours?
Minutes to hours, I would say.
Minutes to hours. But you can't.
I mean, I'm talking just based on the injuries themselves alone, leaving anything else out. You can't time injuries as exactly as you might think from CSI or one of these television programs, but they are generally fresh for sure. And but just looking at those on their own, I would have to say minutes to hours, yes.
Now, at some point, were you given or did you review any files from a lab at the University of California, Davis?
Okay, yeah. So this was actually the clip I was going to get to, but I'm glad that we played through all of that because, again, it's just confirming more of the same, confirming more of, he's very consistent throughout his testimony. Lally's trying to get him in a couple of like little traps. It seems like little hiccups. He's very collected. If he has a no, if he doesn't remember, he's gonna say, yeah, I don't know. I haven't done this in a while, like seen some of these cases in particular in a long time. But I've also reviewed and conducted thousands of autopsies. So he's seen thousands of different deceased human beings and with all kinds of injuries. So it's not surprising that some of the stuff he's not going to remember. And I'm sure there's a lot of stuff he's seen that he doesn't want to remember too, but it's pretty impressive. And it's really interesting. So this is where Lally's going to talk specifically about the DNA swabs. And this is where so his cross-examination of Dr. Russell the other day got pretty heated. Again, I encourage you guys to check out my video on that. We did play, I believe, a little bit of cross-examination just because it got a little heated. And there were points where it seemed like Lally was trying to get you in an I gotcha moment with Dr. Russell. So especially with this UC Davis DNA swab report, specifically the DNA that was taken from John O'Keefe's clothing. But as we know, John O'Keefe's clothing was also stored together in a bag. So like his t-shirt and his sweatshirt, I believe, were both thrown in the same bag. And then they were laid out to dry on parchment paper for a few days before it was properly bagged and stored and all that good stuff. So how reliable can that really be? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a DNA expert, but I assume there's plenty of room for cross-contamination, is there not? I don't know. You guys tell me. But that's what he's referring to here.
I'm not sure. In relation to what?
So are you aware that the State Police Lab in Massachusetts swabbed areas of the sleeve on the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe and sent samples from that in the areas of where the injuries occurred on his right arm, and then sent that to a lab at UC Davis? Are you aware of that?
I'm not sure that I remember that, no.
And so you're equally unaware then that when that was tested, there was no canine DNA found from any of those swabbings in the area where the injuries that you're
He's
describing,
really
the scratch marks
clinging
or
to
bite
the,
marks
like,
occurred.
the no
I
dog
wasn't aware of
thing.
that. I must have missed it.
Are you aware of any sort of bite history or a specific animal at 34 Fairview being involved in attacks on other dogs?
I'm sorry, I don't think I understood that question.
Were you aware that there was a dog that resided at 34 Fairview Road?
Am I aware that there was a dog there?
Yes.
I was informed there was, yes.
Were you also informed that that dog, months later, after January 2022, was involved in an incident in which it attacked another dog, humans intervened, and one of the humans was bitten?
No, I didn't know that.
Were you aware that there were photographs of an actual bite mark from that actual dog months after January 29th? Were you shown any of that?
No, I don't believe I was.
So the real significance behind the dog, and it's really taken me a long time to piece all of this together, is just essentially where John O'Keefe was. We all agree that Chloe, the dog, or any dog for that matter, didn't cause his death. The injuries he sustained from whatever created those injuries did not kill him. But what it helps is establish for both sides where John O'Keefe was that night. Was he inside the house or was he outside the house? And if he was outside the house, to go along with the Commonwealth's theory of he was hit by Karen Reed's vehicle and that's how those injuries were sustained, therefore he could not have been inside that home. But isn't that what the cell phone data is supposed to show? So that, at least from my perspective, I feel like that's the significance of it being Chloe or not being Chloe. But in terms of like everything else in this case, I feel like it's important for that fact. And the idea of maybe Chloe attacked him for, I don't know. I don't know. But we know that those injuries were definitely, according to Dr. Sheridan, ante-mortem before John O'Keefe passed. So again, let me know what you guys think the purpose of the dog is. So now again, he's trying to debunk that it was Chloe, comparing the bite marks. Her bite marks are different than the bite marks you're seeing, or alleged bite marks you're seeing on John O'Keefe's arm.
Now, sir, did you write a report in relation to what you observed or anything in regard to your opinion or your testimony that you're testifying to here today?
I didn't write a report as such, but I signed a declaration early on in my involvement in this case.
And that was a declaration or an affidavit that you signed under the pains and penalties of perjury back on January 31st, 2023. Is that correct?
Sorry, what's about that?
When you're talking about a declaration, you're referring to an affidavit that you filed with court under the pains and penalties of perjury in January of 2023.
I didn't think it was January, but however, there was only one, so whatever you have.
Now, at any point
It's
in time,
like, yeah,
were you made aware
sure,
that
I don't
there were,
know, dude.
microscopic pieces of the defendant's taillight, as small as 1/16th of an inch by 1/16th of an inch that were found
So
in
he
Mr. O'Keefe's
hopped
clothing.
really quick off the dog stuff.
Never found Mr. O'Keefe's what?
Mr. O'Keefe's shirts.
I don't remember that specifically.
And that those pieces were then found to be consistent with the defendant's taillight.
Like I said, I don't remember that particular part.
Were you ever shown any material indicating that there was DNA from the defendant's taillight housing that was consistent with Mr. O'Keefe?
I asked about that myself, but I think the answer I got was no.
Now, were you ever told about a piece of human hair that was found on the right rear quarter panel
Oh
near
my
the area
God,
where there was a
frickin'
dent
hair.
on the back right of the defendant's vehicle?
No, I don't remember that.
So then you weren't also
The hair that was tested by the woman who literally was told not to test hair DNA, like not to test that, like during her, like earlier in her career, like that, the hair, Like, even the dog's more significant than that, 'cause at least, again, I can see how, like, it's tied to where John O'Keefe could have been his location, whether or not he was inside the house, not inside the house, but that what hair gets on my cat's hair is everywhere, guys. My hair is everywhere. I got long hair. My hair ends up everywhere. Sparkles too. Oh my god, I can't tell you how many times, like, especially when I worked in the club. I used to work in a club for a very long time as a dancer. And it would be even, like, years after it's been years since I danced, and years after I danced, I still sometimes, like, have random sparkles on pieces of my clothing that have been washed, like, numbers on like, it just some stuff just doesn't and it's unexplainable. It's not significant. But this is what happens when you can't prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to grasp at every little thing, including a little piece of hair.
Also told that that was then sent out for mitochondrial DNA testing, and it was consistent with that of Mr. O'Keefe to a degree of 99.895%.
You talk about a hair sample now. Yeah. No, I didn't have that. Mhm.
It's not like a clump of hair. It's not like and he was dating Karen. He was dating Karen. It was her car. He was in her car. Like, I just don't and, like, it was found, like, on the outside of the vehicle, but again, it's, like, on the taillight, I think, or around the taillight at least, and again, it's, like, I don't my hair ends up everywhere. Like, are you gonna convince me of something or accuse me of doing something? Because you found my hair somewhere? Like,
Now, doctor, would you agree that in blunt impact injuries, the characteristics of a blunt object can then be transferred to the victim in the form of pattern abrasions that match the characteristics of that blunt object?
Yes. Mhm.
Now, of the photographs, you reviewed photographs of the scene, photographs of the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, I did. Mhm.
You're aware that there were a number of different pieces of the defendant's taillight that were photographed as well. Did you ever see those?
I did, yes. Mhm.
Do you recall seeing any piece of a clear plastic taillight piece that was recovered on January 29th, along with Mr. O'Keefe's sneaker that had dimpling on the outside of that clear piece of plastic?
I remember seeing the pictures of the glass fragments, but I don't remember any more specifics than that.
Do you know what a compression abrasion is?
What?
Compression abrasion.
Yeah, although it's not a term we use all the time, but however, yes.
And a compression abrasion can occur when there's direct pressure from a blunt object together with slight rubbing movements that produce skin and epidermal crushing. Is that correct?
Yeah, you have to have some lateral movement as well, though, to get an abrasion.
this is also too, like, I love it. Lally is trying to come up with, like, these scientific terms because Jackson was pulling out, like, kinetics and engineer and biomechanics during Trooper Paul's testimony and asking him definitions of, like, and I feel like this is Lally's attempt at trying to be Jackson. I don't know. Maybe I feel like he probably secretly fangirls over him, like, lawyering. Like, he's got a lawyer crush on Jackson, and that's why he's trying to pull out smart questions like these, like the smart questions that he thinks are smart. They Wikipedia'd, to try and trip he's like, "That's I mean, we don't really use that term, but yeah, okay, cool. I guess I know what you're talking about." It's very entertaining. It's very funny to me.
Now, when you were talking about prior autopsies that you've done involving pedestrian collisions, is it fair to say that most of those pedestrian collisions that you were doing autopsies on involved pedestrians being struck by the front of the vehicle?
Yeah, mostly the front. Mhm.
So mostly it's pedestrians who are crossing the street or standing in the street and then struck by the front of the vehicle, correct?
Yeah, I think they were all. I have actually done a couple of cases where children were hit by the back of a reversing vehicle. This is in the days before they had the rear videos on cars that they have now. But so those cases were impacts against the back of the vehicle. But most of the pedestrian cases, yeah, are, as you say, they're the front of the vehicle hitting the person.
And just briefly on that, as far as the defendant's vehicle itself, are you aware that there were rear backup cameras and a 360-degree overhead view from the back of her vehicle?
I remember reading that, yes.
That you weren't able to recover any data from, so why are you even bringing that up? Like, if we had backup cam footage, just like ring camera like, if we had any footage, this case would have never, ever, I mean, it still shouldn't have, with the lack thereof, it shouldn't have gone to trial. But imagine if we had backup camera. That's it. So why are you bringing it up? Like, are you aware? Like, you couldn't recover it.
Now, understanding what you're talking about as far as a rear vehicle pedestrian collision, is that typically sort of the wear on the vehicle? Let me ask you this first. When you are doing an autopsy in relation to a pedestrian collision, much of the information that you're gaining about that is what you receive from the investigating agency, whether it's the police or something like that, correct?
It varies a lot from one case to another. Sometimes you get no or virtually no information about the accident, because some of these cases I've done, some of them were witnessed, some weren't. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So when they weren't witnessed, when the person was just found later or sometime afterwards, you wouldn't have necessarily any. The vehicle would typically not be there. These would be hit and run type situations, and so in those cases, you wouldn't have all that kind of information. So it varies. It varies.
And understanding that it varies, but primarily what I'm saying is whatever information as far as the body comes in and you're going to conduct an autopsy, there would be some information from law enforcement or witness statements or something as to what type of death this is, as far as gunshot wound, stabbing, pedestrian collision, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, in those unwitnessed cases of pedestrians, I might be given the information that it's probably a pedestrian fatality from a car.
And when it comes to pedestrian collisions, and most of which that you've seen are, again, from the front of the vehicle striking a pedestrian on the roadway, is that correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And are you familiar with what role sort of the center of mass of that person versus the center of mass of where they're struck plays in reference to their injuries?
Yeah, that can have a big effect on how the body reacts to the impact. Mm-hmm.
So most of the time when you're talking about sort of lower extremity injuries or pelvic fractures or things like that, that's in a frontal collision with the pedestrian, correct?
Most of them were, yeah. I mean, the ones that involved being backed over when they were children, I can't remember the exact distribution of their injuries, except the vehicle went right over them. I do remember that. But anyway, the answer to your question, maybe I'm wandering in my mind, so can you ask me again?
I think you've answered it. So my next question, sir, is when it comes to the rear end collisions, primarily being children, you would agree with me that they have a lower center of mass than the 6'1", 200 something?
Oh, yeah.
I'm muted. They're a lot smaller. That makes a lot of sense. They're a lot smaller. So yeah, if you do run a child, especially in like a giant SUV, any vehicle really, though, like you're gonna hit everything. Whereas like a 6'2" John O'Keefe, who I think they said weighed like 170 pounds, and you're backing into him, because again, remember, he's not getting hit from the front, he's getting hit from behind. Her behind her, you know what I'm saying? In reverse. So I think this is actually probably one of Lally's better questions. Is asking, would the injuries look different for a car crash incident involving a pedestrian, look different than if you were struck with the front of the car? And it would be different depending on the size that you are. So I do think this is a better question. I don't know if he asked this on direct for Trooper Paul. I don't know if he did. I don't know if actually Jackson crossed Trooper Paul on this, because we were so caught up in the key cycles and all that nonsense. So this is a pretty decent question, in my opinion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so as far as them being run over, they're going to get struck. They're probably going to fall to the ground, and then the vehicle's going to go over, correct?
That's right, yeah.
And so how many autopsies have you conducted in regard to pedestrian collisions where they've been sideswiped by the back of the vehicle?
I can't remember.
Can you remember any?
Not off the top of my head, no. Mm-hmm.
And so if someone is struck by the right rear portion of a vehicle and then projected away from the vehicle based on speed, based on force, based on whatever, would you then expect to see those same type of pelvic fractures or lower extremity injuries that you talked about with the frontal collision?
Well, it depends on the exact position of the victim at the moment of impact. And of course, it could be a lot of different things. They could be, the victim could be facing the vehicle, they could be sideways on, they could have their back. But you're going to see bruising somewhere in that area, in one of those areas, either on the back, side, whatever, or the front. I would expect to see bruising, significant bruising.
But as you testified earlier on direct, it's sort of dependent or variable depending on how the victim pedestrian interacted with the vehicle. Isn't that correct?
Yes, but I'd expect bruising for sure. I mean, whether you get fractures and so forth will depend on, or for that matter, internal injuries, depends on a variety of factors, but you're going to get bruising for sure.
You did see bruising on Mr. O'Keefe's right hand, correct?
Yes, a small bruising. It looked like 2, possibly 3, almost confluent or close together bruises.
Were you aware from the materials that you reviewed that Mr. O'Keefe was last seen sort of on video exiting from a bar at about 12:11 a.m. holding a cocktail glass in his right hand?
I beg to remember that, yes.
Were you also aware that there were pieces of a cocktail glass with Mr. O'Keefe's DNA on it that were found right in the general vicinity of where his body was found?
That I don't remember.
I'm sorry, but the glass is just as, in my opinion, as irrelevant as that piece of hair. Like, and I get, like, he had to go there because frickin' Trooper Paul was the one who was like, yeah, John O'Keefe was sideswiped, which was the first time that anybody had heard that. I don't even know if Lally knew that was what he was going to testify to, that he was sideswiped. It really felt like in the moment he was just trying to figure out, like, what made sense in his brain in that moment based on the questions that Jackson was asking him, because he realized, like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I just don't know. And instead of just saying, yeah, man, I just don't know. I don't know. They don't pay me enough to know. They don't pay for me to get a better education for, like, but he just went on. Yeah, he was a sideswipe. Yeah, that's how he was projected there. Like, so Dr. Sheridan here is saying, well, yes, even though the injuries would be different if you were struck with the front of the vehicle versus the rear or the rear side, you would still see some bruising. So now he's trying to, and I really thought he was going to, like, try and go the angle of, well, could he have gotten the hand bruise from being struck? Like, but he's going with the glass. He's going with the glass as that is how he sustained, I guess, that bruising. Like, I get why you gotta go there, but why did this trial happen? Why?
You talked about a couple of different patterns to the injuries that you observed on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm. So my question for you, doctor, is it your testimony that those, what you're terming as animal bites or scratches, were they caused at one time or multiple times, or how many times are we talking about?
You mean on different occasions?
As far as there are multiple abrasions, as you've termed them, and you're attributing them to an animal attack, correct?
I think that's the most likely explanation for these, yes.
And so my question is, sir, is that from the dog or the animal or whatever it is scratching Mr. O'Keefe once, more than once, based on what you...
Why are you going back to the animal?
When I had the laser pointer here, I think I pointed to roughly 1, 2, 3, 4 different areas. So it looks like, and there's an additional, the ones on the lower forearm, I should say, are harder to figure out. But it looks like 4, maybe 5 separate.
I think
4 or 5
Lally
separate
knows
sort of
that
swipes, whether they be with mouth or claws or whatever.
Yeah, that's correct.
I think Lally knows this witness is too smart for him, and he just, like, and he's too, and, like, Lally, the way he's handling this witness is that he's actually, like, a lot more cordial, like, whereas with Dr. Russell, he was, like, out for blood. And I don't know, maybe he's listening to not my videos, sure as hell, but I'm still growing here, guys. But appreciate all of you tuning in, by the way. I really do. It means a lot to me, and I'm so happy we can have these kinds of discussions as well, and we can learn together as well. But it almost feels like because I know I wasn't the only one to say it. I know there were other people saying it too. Like, he was gunning for blood. So I wonder if he took that note. I mean, I'll be curious to see how he handles the other 2 witnesses, because this was the witness I saw probably the most amount of testimony from, but I hadn't heard any background because, again, he wasn't part of the voir dire day that they had last week. So this was like a totally green witness expert to me, but he's charming. And I think even Lally's like, damn, like, he's just a smart guy, and I can't really, like, I can't really go, I'm not going to get what I want. And even when he's disagreeing with me, he's so charming. He's just a sweet old man. So.
Correct.
And so is it your testimony that it's not possible that Mr. O'Keefe received that from some part of the motor vehicle, or glass shattering, or shattering from a taillight, or any sort of metal pieces underneath contained within that taillight housing as far as his interaction with the vehicle?
They don't look remotely like that to me.
So it's not possible, is that correct?
In my opinion, no.
You were asked about some questions with regard to the surface of the ground as far as dirt or grass. Are you familiar with what the weather was like at the time that Mr. O'Keefe, you testified earlier, you were familiar that he was found in snow, correct?
Yes.
I was muted.
Do you know what the temperature was like as far as...
I can't wait to hear
question
this, is what I was
understanding
miming.
cushioning of grass and dirt under normal conditions, but if the ground is physically frozen based on the temperature of outside, would that impact as far as your understanding of the injuries to the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head?
No, I mean, even if there was a small coating of ice, I wouldn't change my opinion based on that, no.
I'm not talking about ice, sir. What I'm talking about is the ground itself being physically frozen based on the temperatures outside. Now, as far as the hard surface that you're talking about, would that include asphalt pavement?
Yes, it could.
And as far as those injuries, the speed, if Mr. O'Keefe was struck by a vehicle and was projected away from that vehicle and then struck his head on the ground, would that be sufficient force, in your opinion, to cause a skull fracture on the back of his head?
If all that happened, yes, and onto asphalt or something like that's like asphalt, yes, if that's indeed what happened.
Not
but, like, for other reasons, I don't think that
grass
is what happened.
Whether
Now,
there
you
was
testified
snow
you were asking
or
questions
ice
about
or
your
whatever,
opinion as to
not
or
by
consistency with
grass.
physical altercation, is that right?
Yes.
And the sort of swelling in Mr. O'Keefe's eyes as far as ecchymosis is concerned there, that was related to the brain injury, is that your understanding?
Well, the skull injury rather than the brain.
Skull
Yeah.
injury, which
Yeah.
leads to the bleeding of the brain, which then leads to the swelling of the eye.
Well, yeah, but no, I mean, let's be clear about this. I mentioned the fractures earlier on that came from the back and went all the way towards the front of the
Let's
skull,
be clear.
including what are called the orbital plates, which are the bone.
I love that, because he, like all these doctor and medical they want to be precise. They don't want to be caught saying something that isn't 100% truthful to what they are explaining. And you'll notice this with most of them on both sides of the fence. A lot of them try to be as accurate as possible, and I like that he's not letting Lally control the conversation. He's not letting Lally take the reins. He's saying, "No, hold up. I mean, let's be clear so they understand and they're not misunderstanding me and getting my words twisted because whatever circus you're trying to run here, buddy."
Bones, the parts of the frontal bone that are right over the eye sockets, and the bone there is very delicate. It's the thinnest part of the skull. Anyway, the photographs and the autopsy report clearly show that the fracture involved that on each side, both orbital plates, in other words. And it's that fracture, it's not the brain itself, but it's that fracture which leads to the bleeding that causes the black eyes, if you want to call them that way.
And as far as what your review of the medical records,
The
your review of
black
autopsy report
eyes.
photographs, things that you observed nothing as far as fractures to Mr. O'Keefe's eye sockets, correct?
Well, the orbital plates, in a sense, are part of the eye sockets, but they're the roof.
Were there any fractures to the orbital bones?
There were no fractures that appeared to be coming from the front, no.
As far as the sclera, was there any broken blood vessels or anything that you observed in either the notes or the reports or the photographs or anything else that you saw?
Broken blood vessels were?
The sclera.
Huh?
Sclera of the eyes? You know what that is?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said, yeah. No, there was just, as far as I know, the eyes were clear, yeah. The eyes themselves were clear, yeah.
Now, as far as the minor injuries that you were talking about, as far as the eyelid or the nose, as far as those minor lacerations you were talking about, there was no bruising around any of those lacerations, correct?
The eyelid laceration, don't forget, is in the same area where we had the other injury, and it's a little bit hard to figure out whether how much hemorrhage, how much of that black eye could even be from related to the laceration, because we've got two possible explanations for the black eyes. One is the skull fracture I've already mentioned, but that doesn't rule out his getting an impact as well on the front, but there's no way you can separate them.
So as far as around those minor lacerations that you're talking about, you didn't observe or see any record of any bruising or any broken bones in those areas whatsoever?
No, the main one that I was relating to when I spoke about the altercation question was the laceration on the eyelid. That's not related to the head injury that we've been discussing. So it's a separate injury, and it's from some kind of blow to the front.
The minor lacerations that you observe, would they be consistent with being struck by broken pieces of glass or broken sharp pieces of plastic?
If it was indeed a laceration, as it was described, then no, because lacerations by definition, although this is a term that's often misused, by the way, even by some doctors, but a laceration by definition is an open wound caused by blunt force, not sharp.
So blunt force, as far as what I'm asking is it possible that the lacerations to his face were caused by a blunt object that then shattered and caused the lacerations to his face?
I find that hard to imagine. I find that very hard to even conceive of.
So it's not conceivable. Is that
Lally's like, man, you're just too smart for me, doctor.
what you're saying?
To me, no.
And from your review of whatever reports and medical records and everything else, what, if anything, did you see? Or did you see anything?
What if anything? He's back to what if anything. That's how you know he's all tripped up.
Near Mr. O'Keefe's body or Mr. O'Keefe being inside the house?
I don't know. I mean, but I heard there was an animal somewhere around the place, a dog. I think you mentioned the dog earlier.
He's back. And I love how he brings that up too. I think you mentioned the dog earlier, right? Like, didn't we already, like, he's jumping back because no, this was not caused by a taillight, broken pieces of plastic. No.
So somewhere around the place, but no evidence that you've seen that an animal interacted with Mr. O'Keefe in any way.
No, I wasn't there, obviously, and all I can say is what I've already said, but I don't know any more than that.
I know you weren't there. What I'm saying is, from the material that you reviewed, was there any indication or any evidence of that animal ever being near, close to, or interacting in any way with Mr. O'Keefe?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I have nothing further.
Wow. Like, I really think that Lally thinks that was the strongest, like the strongest argument he had was the dog. Wow. He got schooled. And he took it. He knew it. You could hear the defeat in his voice. He's not as loud, he's not as confident going into this cross than he was with Dr. Russell. So I'll be curious to hear the reconstructionist, who we're going to get to very, very soon.
Well, thank you.
But first we got redirect.
Thank you.
Show us the Lally.
That photograph of Jerry.
It shows the decedent's knees taken from the right side, but you can see both knees.
Your Honor, permission to mark this and then publish it.
Mark it, put it into evidence. Okay, is there any objections?
So
to
No, yeah.
I believe this is in reference to what I was talking about earlier when Miss Little was asking Dr. Scoribello about any potential injuries that could have been caused to John O'Keefe's knees. Were there anything? Because in certain cases where the bumper is lower, depending on obviously the height of the human being that is being struck, there would be some kind of bruising, some kind of injury likely on the kneecaps. Again, depending on where the bumper is, where the human is, where their kneecaps are. So that, I believe, is what she's getting at. I'm going to let this play for a quick second and I'm going to get some more water. So I'm going to put myself on mute, but enjoy Miss Little's redirect, and I will be back momentarily.
That would be exhibit 657. Yes, you may publish it, Ms. Little.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Sheridan, you were asked on cross-examination about injury to Mr. O'Keefe's knee. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
Is this the injury that you were testifying about earlier?
Yes, this has been mentioned before. It's an operation.
And that's the extent of the injury to Mr. O'Keefe's knee,
Yeah,
correct?
that's it. Yeah, in that area. Yeah.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. All right, Dr. Sheridan, you are all set, sir.
Very well. Thank you, Thank you, Your Honor.
So I had to come back really quickly. I'm going to actually pause this because I'm not done making my water, but I didn't expect that to be as quick as it was. But that's why we love the defense, because they just get right to it. What do you guys think about that freaking testimony? I mean, yeah, I think her bringing up the reports again, the kneecap, just really, really nice job by Miss Little. I'm going to again pause this for a quick second. We will dive in with Mr. Wolfe's testimony. He is the first of the reconstruction specialists. And then we're going to talk to Dr. Rentschler, and then we're going to wrap things up for this video. And next video is going to be all about closing arguments. I cannot wait, but I will see you in 1 second, y'all. Okay, we're back. I got my water. Let us dive right into this. I don't think they take a break, but if they do, we will zip past it. Actually, they might take a break, so we might have to zip.
step right in. Step on
Oh,
me. Stay in the face.
we are going right into Dr. Wolfe.
Tell us what the evidence of the court and jury in the case now hearing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna skip past his background because we heard this on Voir Dire Day, but he is cool as heck. His company works with the NHL. That's really freaking cool, and they also worked with the government. They also were hired by the feds for the federal investigation of this case. So these are not witnesses that the defense hired out of their own research. These were people who were hired. This was a company hired by the feds. So I highly recommend you check out my video. I'm actually going to make a note to leave a timestamp. Excuse me. 1:55. Check out Dear Day, where we get more into their background because it is very interesting. I actually pulled up a clip. They have a YouTube channel where Dr. Wolfe, who looks like David Boreanaz, comes at David Boreanaz. Buffy, hello. He comes in Bone style, and yeah, he has like videos of like what they do, and it's just so cool. So we're gonna skip a little bit past that, but I will link that video in the description, or I'll add like a card up here. I'm still trying to figure out YouTube and how it works, so you can check that out. But we're gonna zoom past a little bit. He is the
forensic engineering consulting firm. We have a variety of disciplines that include human factors, biomechanics, crashworthiness, accident reconstruction, just to name a few.
Yeah, that's what they do. So he's not like the medical guy. He is the wonder if he's going to actually talk about like what his I forget what his exact role is. I think he's the forensics guy. So he has a lot of experience. Obviously, the feds wouldn't have just hired anybody.
Investigate and reconstruct both
Jackson's taking this one, though.
vehicle issues, commercial vehicle issues, motor vehicle, pedestrian issues, all of the above?
Yes, I see all types of accidents.
And how long have you been doing this work with ARCAA?
A little over 7 years now.
What education, training, background qualifies you to perform the duties that you just described for the jury?
Back in 2012, I received a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from James Madison University, along with a minor in mathematics. Some of my courses while at JMU included courses in physics, statics, dynamics, kinematics, material science, along with your other engineering sciences.
So all of the stuff that Trooper Paul doesn't have a background in. Cool.
Do my undergraduate degree, I then went on to the University of Delaware to pursue my PhD in electrical and computer engineering with a concentration in electromagnetics and photonics.
What additional training or experience do you have as it relates to accident reconstruction in addition to the formal education and the PhD?
Reconstruction, three-dimensional laser scanning. So I've continued to an organization known as ACTAR, which is the...
So he went to Northwestern, which is a great school. More about his background. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna hit play here. I'm gonna let it roll, and then again, I didn't see any of his testimony, so I'm kind of watching it in real time. But just from Voir Dire Day, I know there's background stuff that we can skip over.
That deals with Toyota and Lexus vehicle control history records as well.
So that's interesting. So I'll back it up a little bit more. But his company, I'll back it up even more, tests for specifically Toyotas and Lexus vehicles, which is the vehicle that Karen Reed owned. So if anyone would know if this collision, if this accident happened, these guys would know if it was from a Lexus. So I thought that was oddly specific, but very interesting.
objects interacting, a human being interacting with a vehicle, for instance.
Yeah,
That's part
absolutely.
of what you do.
Yes, sir.
Describe that.
So we use hybrid instrumented dummies at ARCCA for our testing. So if we want to have an understanding that an occupant in a vehicle, the forces that they might experience, or for any matter, again, if it's an instance where you have something that ends up falling on someone's head and you want to have an understanding of the forces involved in that, we perform testing with hybrid dummies.
Have you ever authored any peer-reviewed papers in the field of physics?
Yes, sir.
Describe those for me.
So I have a number of papers in the field of lighting and optics. I have a recent publication that deals with Toyota and Lexus vehicle control history records as well.
Is that called Toyota Vehicle Control History, Sudden Braking History Recording Characteristics?
Yes, sir.
All right. Was that specific to dealing with vehicles and their interaction with other vehicles and or pedestrians?
It involved looking at the various triggers that system is capable of recording. And specifically, it was looking at what triggers a sudden braking event. So we were able to determine that those triggers, the sudden braking event is triggered when a driver, I should say the vehicle, reaches...
May we approach?
Lally was like, no, we're not going to talk about key cycle. We're not going to talk about triggers. We're not going to talk about any of that, even though Trooper Buchanan and Tully were medical experts testifying on medical testimony because of their vast experience as police officers in dealing with so many cases. They have seen common. Brian Tully was also a weatherman as well too. That was fun. That was interesting. I didn't do a video on Tully. I can do one later, but now we're so far past it, and there's just so much other craziness going on with this case. I just feel like that was like the least anticlimactic. Like Tully was literally reading a weather report in court. Like it was insane. So they're gonna approach about this because Lally doesn't like it.
Yes, you can move on.
You've been qualified in other courts to testify as an expert in the area of actual
No,
reconstruction. Is that right?
Lally
Yes,
won
sir.
that one.
You were not hired by the defense in this case, correct?
That is correct.
At the time you did your expert review, Dr. Wolfe, and your consultation, you and I had never met.
That's correct.
You did not know who I was.
I did not.
You'd never met Ms. Little?
No.
Mr. Unetti?
No.
Matter of fact, you'd never heard of this case.
That's correct.
You were hired by another agency not connected in any way to the defense, is that right?
Correct.
And not connected in any way to the Commonwealth, is that right?
Correct.
So your analysis and your conclusions and your opinions are completely independent of the defense and the Commonwealth in this case, is that right?
Objection.
Sustained. Mr. Jackson, you can ask it differently.
When you did your analysis and conclusions, well, let me ask it this way. You finalized your report, you and your team, correct?
Correct.
That report is contained in a multi-page
This is like the best
that was
witness
submitted
to have.
following your analysis and your opinions and conclusions, right?
Because this guy, like, he has no connect. If you can't get a better witness than this, like, not only is he charming, he's good looking. Freaking David Boreanaz over here. He's good looking. He's well spoken. He's loud. He's clear. He's easy to understand. He's interesting as heck. Not boring and not hard to follow. Very cool. Very lively. Very engaging. And he's a totally unbiased party with nothing to gain from either side. And he's the defense witness. Like that's a great freaking witness.
Correct. The defense didn't have anything to do with that, correct?
That's why
Correct.
he's
You never
making
met
it
us,
so
didn't know who we
clear.
were when you did this.
Correct.
You never met Mr. Lally, didn't know who he was when you did this.
Correct.
So your analysis, opinions, testing, and conclusions were requested by a completely separate agency.
That is correct.
Goes without saying, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. You haven't been paid by the defense,
You have not paid us anything, no.
and you don't work for us.
That's correct.
As a matter of fact, I've never asked you specific questions about your testing before today.
That is correct.
Your work product, the report that you
So
provided, was
actually,
provided
I
both
didn't
to
know
the
that. I
defense as
didn't
well as the
know.
Commonwealth. Is that right?
So
That's my understanding, yes.
And you were equally available to both sides.
I guess because he's not technically hired by the defense, because again, the agency he's speaking of, and I guess they can't mention this in this trial, but he's talking about the feds. The feds hired them to investigate this case because they saw something fishy in the report by Trooper Paul. They didn't think the feds were like, you guys didn't do a good job. We gotta come in and we gotta shake this stuff up and bring in our own people because we don't trust you to handle anything. what kind of impression does that leave? And I don't know if the jury is allowed to know. That was probably decided a while ago that they couldn't say specifically. I didn't hear anything in voir dire, but I'm assuming that they were not allowed to mention it, and maybe because it conflicts with the current federal investigation. I mean, if the jury knew there was a federal investigation going on, then how many people would be automatically like, yeah, free Karen Reed? If the feds don't trust these people to do their job, why should we? Why are we going to convict this poor woman? So that is why Jackson is harping on that so much. And I didn't know, and I guess it's because they were hired by the feds that they can't accept payment, because they're going to probably use whatever testimony they use whatever testimony they give in this trial. The feds, for freaking sure, are going to use that to build their case 100%. That's going to be an interesting one.
In terms of them reaching out?
Correct.
Yes,
And I called you ultimately after receiving your report, asked if you join us and testify, correct?
that is correct.
Were you and your team asked to undertake a review for purposes of accident reconstruction of the case that's now pending before the court?
Yes, sir.
Was your team asked to do this by the agency that ultimately retained you, not us?
That's correct.
Who at ARCAA was assigned to the team who would ultimately undertake this job of accident reconstruction?
It was myself, Dr. Andrew Rentschler, and Scott Klein.
What was Dr. Rentschler's role in this case, as it's distinguished from your role in the case?
Certainly. So Dr. Rentschler is a biomechanical engineer, and ultimately he assessed whether or not there was a mechanism for the injuries of Mr. John O'Keefe.
And what was your focus? If he's talking about the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe, what was your focus in your reconstruction and your analysis?
I would simply say it was looking more at the damage to the vehicle.
Okay, so in terms of your team.
So there you go. He's the guy who's looking at the damage to the vehicle. Rentschler, who we're going to speak to last and next, is the guy who is going to testify to John O'Keefe's injuries.
And the responsibilities of each of the team members, you were more focused on the damage to the SUV. Dr. Rentschler was more focused on the injuries suffered by Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
I think that's a fair characterization, although with the caveat that we worked together as a team. So we weren't isolated kind of in those areas, not speaking to each other. We certainly worked together on the analysis.
Understood. Were you provided or did you review certain materials in furtherance of your consultation in this matter?
Yes.
What were you provided?
We were provided photographs of the incident location. We were provided photographs of the Lexus. There were a couple of incident reports that we received. I could look at my report for the full list, but those are the ones.
You can go ahead and do that, Doctor.
Do you have the report with you?
He's like, please, and read it slowly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
This guy looks tall too. I wonder how tall he is.
How many categories of
6'2"?
materials were you provided?
Provided, it would be approximately 10.
Could you list those off for the jurors, please?
It would be the Norfolk SPDU homicide death report, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of State Police crime scene report, OCME dispatch removal report, photographs of the incident location, videos of the incident location, photographs of the 2021 Lexus LX 570, photographs of recovered evidence, crash data retrieval report from the 2021 Lexus 570, report of autopsy, and autopsy photographs.
Based on these data that you were provided, were you able to satisfactorily, to your mind, satisfactorily engage in the consultations you were hired to do?
Yes.
And come up with some opinions and conclusions based on scientific certainty?
Yes.
Did you review scene photographs of the alleged incident?
Yes, sir.
What information were you able to glean or gather from your review of the photographs, from the scene specifically?
So from those photographs, I was able to identify there was fragments of transparent red, clear plastic. There also appeared to be pieces of chrome and black plastic. I also observed what appeared to be glass fragments along with a black drinking straw.
Did you also review some videos?
Yes.
That was out at the scene, maybe a leaf blower?
Correct. It appeared to be daytime, yes.
Okay. What did you note about the photography at the scene of the items that were being photographed?
Well, I think one thing that comes to mind is it was a little bit difficult to follow the evidence, so to speak. So typically, when I go out and do an inspection, especially of a fresh incident, let's say I've got a debris field, I've got tire marks, what I like to do is kind of step into the scene, if you will, where you take global perspective shots, and then you step into a specific piece of evidence so that you can, at a later point in time, identify where that evidence is. I noted that in a lot of these photographs, I didn't see a whole lot of that stepping in. It was essentially just zoomed right into where that evidence is, but not really having a great understanding of where was it relative to all the other evidence.
Oh, so
Correct.
interesting. Exactly. It's like, where is the depth of perception? How far? Because they didn't measure anything. They didn't say this was X feet away from X thing. They didn't do any of that. And a lot of the pictures looked like frickin' sonograms.
Based on your review of all the materials that you described for the court, did you get an understanding of what the Commonwealth's theory of the case is, specifically that Mr. O'Keefe was struck by the Lexus SUV?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you come to understand that the allegations before the court were that Mr. O'Keefe was struck by the vehicle?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Did you perform an accident reconstruction specifically focused on determining whether or not damage to the Lexus was consistent with hitting Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes, I think that's a fair characterization.
And reversing that, was your accident reconstruction also focused on whether or not the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe were the result of being hit by a vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. During your analysis, did you note the damage to the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Describe that, please.
So the primary damage was to the right taillight. It appeared to be fractured with the majority of the lens cover, so that clear and red plastic covering missing from it. In addition to that, if you're looking at the back of the vehicle, to the left of that, in the area above the, there's also another tail lamp assembly on the lift gate. So above that assembly, there was a small dent along with some paint chips on the bumper, more so on the wraparound section as it kind of curves around to the right side of the vehicle. There appeared to be some superficial scratches as well in that area.
Was there any other damage or deformation that you were able to glean from your review, the photogrammetry, damage to the Lexus, the bumpers, the panels, quarter panel, the sheet metal, anything like that?
No, the rest was remarkably intact.
Is it common in vehicle pedestrian collisions that there's some sort of bumper displacement and or sheet metal deformation that's concomitant to that?
Absolutely. Assuming a pedestrian is positioned in a normal upright position, you certainly would expect to see damage to the bumper. In a lot of cases, what happens is, the bumper is just clipped on. So again, the force of that impact will oftentimes cause the bumper to kind of become unmounted or unclipped. You certainly could see deformation to body paneling, such as the lift gate or the quarter panel as well.
Which I'm surprised actually Lally didn't object to that. But all right, I'm glad he got the answer in.
Is that especially true at higher speeds, meaning above 15 miles per hour or so?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Was there any apparent damage to the Lexus that appeared consistent with any kind of pedestrian interaction that you saw?
No, it was really confined to just the taillight, a very isolated portion of the vehicle.
During your review and your investigation, did you note information concerning items that were supposedly found on the bumper?
Yes.
What was that?
I believe it was noted there was 2 apparent glass fragments located on the top bumper cover.
What's the significance of the presence of those items or the lack of materiality of those items in your view?
Well, again, I think it's going back to the scene evidence. Again, we knew that there was glass fragments, what appeared to be from a drinking glass, at the scene of the alleged incident.
Is there any glass consistent with the glass that was supposedly found on the bumper in the taillight housing, taillight mechanism, anything from the car, from the Lexus, that would account for that glass?
Okay, I think I understand. So the taillight itself is not comprised of any glass. It is all plastic. So that damage, or I should say that glass on the top bumper cover could not have come from the right taillight.
Now, based on your review of the information that was provided to you, did you undertake any testing of that vehicle? I'm sorry, any testing concerning?
Again, we knew that there was glass fragments, what appeared to be from a drinking glass, at the scene of the alleged incident.
Is there any glass consistent with the glass that was supposedly found on the bumper in the taillight housing, the taillight mechanism, anything from the car, from the Lexus, that would account for that glass?
Okay, I think I understand. So the taillight itself is not comprised of any glass. It is all plastic. So that damage, or I should say that glass on the top bumper cover could not have come from the right taillight.
Now, based on your review of the information that was provided to you, did you?
I muted again. That glass had to have come from something other than the taillight. Cool.
Did you undertake any testing of that vehicle? I'm sorry, any testing concerning the damage to the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
All right, can you describe what that testing was?
So we performed, again, this is with Dr. Rentschler and I working together on this again. We performed projectile testing to the tail lamp with a drinking glass as well as a hybrid head form.
Let's take those one at a time. How would you describe the drinking glass test?
Certainly. So again, from our review of the evidence, we knew that we had an isolated portion of damage to Lexus confined to the taillight. So we know that we're dealing with potentially a small object that could have created that. Looking at, again, the evidence in terms of the scene photographs, we know that we have a damaged drinking glass at the scene in the vicinity of the fragments of the taillight. So the theory that Dr. Rentschler and I put forward is potentially an individual through this drinking glass at the back of the Lexus causing the taillight to fracture.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. You and Dr. Rentschler formed that theory and wanted to test that theory, correct?
Yes.
You were not told that theory by defense because you've never met us?
Correct.
You were not told that theory by the Commonwealth. You never met them, correct?
Correct.
Your theory was the product of simply having some facts extant in the data, a broken drinking glass, a broken taillight, let's put them together and figure out if the drinking glass could be responsible for the taillight, vice versa.
Absolutely, yes.
And that was your determination of, well, we were given instructions to reconstruct this, let's look at every single angle, correct?
Absolutely. And I will note, as part of the engagement with the entity that retained us, we were asked not to do any outside research or investigation of the case. It was to be based solely on the evidence that we were provided.
Okay. As a matter of fact, and importantly, while you were doing your testing, had you ever even heard of the Karen Reed case?
No.
So getting back to that testing, and I interrupted your flow, you were looking at whether or not the glass could have produced the damage to the rear taillight that you saw, correct?
Correct.
And what did you do in furtherance of making a determination about whether or not that was possible?
Certainly. So myself and one of our lab technicians at ARCCA, we designed and developed a pressurized air cannon. So it was capable of firing a projectile such as a drinking glass at the taillight. So essentially, you think of it kind of as a giant cannon, but it had a barrel, and then there was a valve that would open rapidly, and directly behind that was a pressurized vessel. And depending on the pressure, the PSI of that vessel would determine essentially the speed at which that glass would be projected into the taillight.
So you literally built a cannon?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Tell me what the results of your testing was with this pneumatic cannon that would fire the drinking glass.
Certainly. So,
like, if this guy is a dad, and I'm sure he is, I'm sure he has a wife, I'm sure, like, I'm sure he's David Boreanaz. This guy is awesome. That is like a dad. My dad is the coolest dad. Let me bring him for show and tell. Like that. Like, take my dad to school day. Actually, take me to work day. Heck yeah. Oh my God, that is so freaking cool. He built a cannon. A cannon. What did Trooper Paul build? What did Trooper Paul build? He didn't build any cannon.
we performed 2 different tests in terms of speeds. The target speeds were 30 and 40 miles per hour.
Why was that?
Well, so with consultation with Dr. Rentschler, he indicated that that is a reasonable speed at which an adult male or an individual, for that matter, could throw a drinking glass at the taillight.
Because he's a biomechanics.
Anybody told you specific? Let me see if I can rephrase that. Had anybody indicated that there was any evidence whatsoever that John O'Keefe had thrown a drinking glass at the taillight?
No.
Was this another example of you and Dr. Rentschler and your team just exploring sort of every possibility and working a little bit in the blind?
Objection.
Sustained.
What was the reason that you decided, or you and your team decided, that you wanted to approximate how a grown man could throw a glass in a taillight?
Well, I think we wanted to have an understanding is when a projectile such as a drinking glass interacted with the taillight, would we get damage on the test taillight that was consistent with that of the subject taillight?
Understood. So based on your theory, were you able to approximate the damage on the taillight?
Yes.
Describe that for us.
So as I mentioned, we ran 2 tests. The target speeds were at 30 and 40 miles per hour. And there was a little bit of variability in terms of what our target was and what we actually achieved. So the achieved speeds were at 31 miles per hour and 37 miles per hour. So there's just depending on how the glass leaves the barrel and some of the rotation can affect some of the speed, or ultimately the end result speed to that. So what I will say, though, is that with the 37 mile per hour projectile into the taillight, we noted and observed that there was damage that was consistent with that of the subject tail lamp, and that the test tail lamp had the majority of the outer lens fractured and missing, broken into pieces, as well as some underlying damage to some of the internal components as well.
Are you saying, well, let me ask a different question. You were able to replicate the damage to the taillight using a pneumatic cannon firing a glass at 37 miles an hour directly at the taillight, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, he did.
And that would also shatter the glass too, correct?
Correct.
Did you do any testing about whether or not that damage to the taillight could be produced by a person simply holding a glass and being hit by the car driving in reverse?
We didn't do any testing of that, and primarily because, again, if we're looking at the arm and its total length, right? We only have a narrow damage pattern, which on the taillight, if you think about where where it meets the lift gate into where it starts to wrap around to the side of the vehicle, it's only about 6.5 inches in width.
All right. When you fired the glass into the taillight was static. In other words, it was not going to move. It was immovable at that point, correct?
Correct.
All right. So the glass is hurling through the air at 37 miles an hour and hits the static object that's resisting, and that smash is what produced ultimately the taillight damage that you were able to replicate. Is that right?
Yes.
If a person were holding in his hand the glass and the taillight were to hit that hand, the hand would not remain static, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask differently, Mr. Jackson.
If the taillight were to the taillight would make contact with a person holding the glass, throwing the glass into the taillight. In other words, are they apples and apples?
No, I don't think it would be the same.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, again, the damage to the back of the Lexus, again, is confined to just that, roughly, again, we're talking about the taillight itself, that 6.5-inch section in width.
Right.
So it's inconsistent with the total length of the arm, and certainly from discussion with Dr. Rentschler, inconsistent with the injuries to the arm.
So given everything in your investigation was revealed concerning this testing, are you saying that the taillight was damaged by John O'Keefe holding a drinking glass that was hit by an SUV?
Objection.
In all the information that you provided, you were not provided anything that suggested that John O'Keefe threw a glass at the taillight. Right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Your approach.
It's just, yes.
Dude, he already said that. Like, I don't understand why you're objecting, Lally. He already said it.
May I? Yes, thank you.
But aren't those, like, isn't that cannon thing super cool? Like, sorry, that was freaking cool. I
What
wish you
information
were my
were you provided
dad.
that suggested that John O'Keefe threw a glass at the taillight?
No information.
What information, if any, were you provided that suggested that John O'Keefe may have had a pneumatic cannon with him that night?
I'm not aware of any information regarding that.
All right. You also did some testing concerning a drop test. Is that right?
Correct.
Tell us about that drop testing.
Certainly. So again, through discussion with Dr. Rentschler, it was my understanding that Mr. O'Keefe had a skull fracture on the back of his head. So we wanted to do an evaluation of the interaction between the back of a head. In this case, we used again, talking about that instrumented dummy again, we used the instrumented hybrid head form to perform a drop test to evaluate the forces of an interaction between a taillight from the Lexus and the human head.
What height did you choose to perform this drop test?
7.5 feet.
Why'd you choose that height?
Well, if you calculate it through physics and the acceleration due to gravity, that would equate to an impact speed of 15 miles per hour at that height.
And what was the significance of 15 miles per hour?
Well, that was essentially kind of a starting point for us, if you will. So I will tell you that in reverse, 15 miles an hour is fast. I don't know if you've ever looked at your speedometer when you're pulling into your driveway, reversing into it, into a parking stall.
Just like Aiden Carney's video, Turtleboy's video that I had played in that Trooper Paul video I created. Aiden recreated his own version of him going in reverse on 34 Fairview, going 24 miles an hour. He didn't actually reach 24 miles an hour, but he did go over the 60, I think they said 62 feet. She was rolling in reverse, going 24 miles an hour. He only got up to like 19, and he said that felt freaking fast, and it looked fast. I can only imagine what it felt like. I would have been the shock and the horror I would have felt. So I'm glad he's bringing this up too, because again, it's people don't realize. You think driving, going and drive 24 miles an hour. Yeah, of course, that's a school speed limit. You feel like you're moving at a snail's pace, but moving that quickly in reverse, especially in the snow. So I'm curious to hear more of what he has to say. But what do you guys think too, before we get to that, of that theory about that they came up with throwing? I didn't even think of that. Somebody throwing a glass at the back of her car and that breaking her taillight. Because up until this point, everybody has, I believe that she broke her taillight from hitting John O'Keefe's car. But it is interesting. And then who would have thrown that glass? I mean, if it was John O'Keefe's glass, it's likely he did. Maybe that's why she left. Maybe that's why she dropped him off, didn't go inside with him. Maybe he was a little too tipsy. Maybe she didn't want to have any of it. She just, you go do your thing. I'll go wait for you, but you're only going to be there for a few minutes, because I'm still trying to get that whole, I'm still in my brain, I'm still trying to make sense of the time that she made that first phone call to him and left that first voicemail we heard the last video or 2 videos ago, calling John O'Keefe's phone. So I mean, the series of events is kind of making sense. So that's an interesting theory.
All. Most people probably don't go more than 5 miles an hour or so. So 15 miles an hour in reverse is fast, especially when we're talking about, it's my understanding it was nighttime. There was winter conditions, potentially wet or icy roads. So again, that speed is going to be what I would say on the high end for going in reverse. So also in addition to with respect to kind of just the nature of that speed, it's my understanding through discussion with Dr. Rentschler that at 15 miles an hour, you start to see significant injuries to the human body when it makes contact with a vehicle. And I think one last point is that we needed to pick a speed where, again, this is kind of just us brainstorming, where we would have damage to the taillight, right? It would fracture it, but it wouldn't completely obliterate it. So we knew if we chose a speed, for instance, of 40 miles an hour, we know we're going to completely essentially explode the taillight. But if we do 1 mile an hour, we may not do anything to it, right? So we kind of had to pick a middle ground to again cause damage to the taillight.
What was your conclusion with following that testing? What was your conclusion with regard to whether or not it was consistent or inconsistent with the damage to the truck, the taillight was consistent or inconsistent with making contact with John O'Keefe's head at or above 15 miles an hour?
So strictly speaking to a damage perspective, the 15 mile an hour interaction between the hybrid head form and the test tail lamp produced significantly more damage than that of the subject vehicle. So that indicates that, again, the damage on the subject taillight was less than that of the test taillight.
So if I were to ask you whether or not there would be more or less damage to the taillight if you increase the speed to 24 miles an hour, what's your conclusion?
Well, you're talking about significantly more kinetic energy. So if you just think about it from, again, a kinetic energy standpoint, kinetic energy is equal to 1/2 times the mass and the velocity squared. So if you're squaring that velocity and you're going from 15 up to 24 miles per hour, you're going to get a significant amount of more energy associated with that. Probably, I could pull up my calculator, but you're probably looking at 2.5 more times energy than a 15 mile an hour test.
Which means 2.5 more times the damage to the taillight?
Certainly.
Which you did not see in your review of the materials, correct?
Correct.
So what is your opinion or conclusion as to whether or not the damage to the taillight was caused by striking John O'Keefe's head?
From a damage standpoint, it was inconsistent.
I want to shift gears back to the injuries that you saw concerning Mr. O'Keefe's arm, his right arm.
So now he's going to go down like all the parts of the body where there were injuries on John O'Keefe. So he started with the head because that had the most damage. And as I was saying, would he have been because he's 6'2", so like for the taillight to have, and I don't think nobody was trying to claim that on the Commonwealth side, but they have to go through each extremity where injuries were found. So, and this is just so fascinating to me. I can't wait for Rentschler.
During the course of your investigation, did you look at photographs and investigate the injuries to his right arm?
Yes, sir.
What's the width of the taillight, specifically from where it meets the lift gate to the left side? I'm sorry, to the side of the vehicle, the right side of the vehicle.
To the right. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that is about 6.5 inches. It starts to wrap around to the right side. So really, it's even though the taillight continues, it's not projecting out on the back end where it's again wrapping around. So in terms of the width that is facing the rear, if you will, it's about 6.5 inches.
And you noted that there was a dent and some paint chips that you identified above the lift gate, correct?
Correct.
How far away from the right side of the vehicle were those scratches and that dent?
Approximately 20 inches.
What was the significance of that distance?
Well, again, to go back to your question about, I think if somebody was holding a drinking glass, right, and their arm was extended to cause that damage, or if it's theorized that those dents and chips were from that. Again, the thing that sticks out to me is that you have essentially the Lexus taillight.
So ask another question.
What is the
He wanted to.
What's the significance
He's
of
like,
whether or not there was damage between the dent and the taillight? In other words, that 20-inch area. Was it dented? Was it formed in any way?
So in terms of, again, if we're talking about, again, looking at the back of the vehicle and we go to kind of where that right tail lamp just meets the liftgate, as I mentioned, there's another lamp assembly on the liftgate itself. There's also a chrome trim piece above that, and then certainly the body paneling to the liftgate itself. And I think what stood out to me is that between that dent and the fractured taillight, there was no observable damage to that area, which I would have expected had an arm been positioned there.
Can you calculate, or could you calculate, or did you calculate the amount of force that would be required to strike a person just only on the outstretched portion of his arm in order to project him a number of feet, for instance, 30 feet in one direction or another?
Okay, I just want to make sure. Objection.
Take a distance out of it. Break it down.
I'll ask you the same question, but without the 30 feet.
Okay.
Were you able to calculate, or could you calculate the force that would be required to strike a person on his outstretched arm hard enough to spin him around and project him a number of feet?
If you're talking about only an interaction between the arm and the back of the vehicle, no, there wouldn't be any projection. Again, if you think about this, the arm weighs about, again, with Mr. O'Keefe would be about 11 pounds. So you still have, another 200 plus pounds being held down by gravity, and the force is only acting on the arm. So essentially the arm would be accelerated, but the whole body, because the center of mass is not being struck, would not be projected.
Is the absence of the damage that you described the
Interesting, because Trooper Paul testified that his entire body was projected, but over here, David Boreanaz is saying, no, my friend. Because that was not the center of mass. If you're saying the center of mass was the arm, then that is the thing that would have likely, if I'm understanding correctly, and this is the way I envision it, is that would have been projected, maybe even detached from the body if it was hit hard enough. That's what it sounds like to me in my human brain. Let me know what you guys think. But that's not at all what Trooper Paul testified to. He said, well, it doesn't matter because he was sideswiped, because they wanted to fit in the theory that that's how John O'Keefe got those abrasions on his arm, as Dr. Sheridan just testified. So they're just shutting it down. They're shutting it down over here. David Boreanaz, we got Anthony Hopkins, we got like the trifecta, and then we got Alfred Molina coming up, Dr. Rentschler. We got like the whole cast. We got the whole cast, man. It's like a Hollywood red carpet of just geniuses.
Between the dent and the rest of the vehicle, with the exception of the taillight, is that consistent or inconsistent with striking an outstretched arm of a human being?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
That would be inconsistent in my opinion.
They have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
And what is your opinion, Doctor, as to the amount of damage that you would expect to see at 15 miles per hour or above on the taillight, if in fact that vehicle were moving in reverse and were to strike something on a human body, for instance, an elbow or an arm?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Probably not.
Sorry.
I'm trying. Physics, that's fine.
I'm trying physics.
From your testing, what would you expect to see in terms of the damage to the right rear taillight, if in fact that taillight were to make contact with a part of a human body, for instance, an elbow or an arm, at 15 miles an hour or above? What would the level of damage be as compared to the damage that you actually saw?
Well, if we compare it to, again, looking at the drop test that we did with the hybrid head, which weighs about 10 pounds. So again, if we're talking about now a human arm that's comparable to that same weight, we certainly would expect to see a comparable level of force and damage. So as I mentioned, if the arm is outstretched across the right tail lamp and into the liftgate section, I would certainly expect to see deformation to that body paneling, even potentially the tail light on the liftgate itself and that chrome piece as well.
Based on the entirety of your investigation, your entire team's investigation, all the testing that you did, all the biomechanical testing and the engineering and the physics testing that you did, in your expert opinion, was that taillight damaged by striking John O'Keefe on the head?
Objection.
Sustained.
In your opinion, was the taillight damaged by either striking Mr. O'Keefe on the head or the arm?
Objection.
Sustained.
Any reproach?
Yes.
You are muted.
Boop, boop. Boop, boop. You had to have known Lally was going to object. I mean, I feel like Jackson already asked that anyways. So, like, yeah, I mean, no, it's not consistent with that. It's not. What's more than likely is that, yeah, maybe he threw a glass at Karen Reed's car. She said something. He didn't like it. Maybe John was an angry drunk. Threw the glass. That's how that glass broke. That's how the taillight broke. Maybe it was already a little bit cracked, and then she backed into his car. And I could see a world where that makes more sense than him getting sideswiped, exploding the taillight from his elbow arm still attached, and getting projected and pirouetting 30 feet in the air. But that's my opinion. What do you guys think, huh?
Are unmuted.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Last question, Doctor. In your expert opinion, based on all your testing, is the damage to the taillight that you saw consistent with striking a human head?
No.
In your expert opinion, is the damage to the taillight consistent with striking a human arm?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, jurors, we will take our morning recess.
Ooh, they're on morning recess, so we're gonna skip. Gonna fan it out. Lally's gonna take the reins. We'll listen to a little bit of Lally Dally.
As well, same day as a drinking straw on February 3rd in the area where the body of Mr. O'Keefe was discovered.
In the area of the front yard, yes.
Now, you have some familiarity through working as a crash reconstructionist with pedestrian collisions, correct?
Correct.
Is it common or uncommon for in the course of a pedestrian collision, for a shoe or glasses or a hat or something to fall off of that pedestrian in the collision sequence near where the area of impact occurs?
Well, I think that depends on the interaction between the two. If it's more of a side swipe type interaction, if we're just talking about an arm, for instance, contacting the vehicle, no, I would not expect the shoe to come off. If it's something where the entire body is interacting with the vehicle, then yes, there's a greater likelihood that something like a shoe will come off. Yes.
That's also a good point too, because I don't think Jackson asked about the shoe. Because remember, John O'Keefe had one shoe off that was found, like I forget how far away, where exactly the shoe was found. I think it was buried in some snow as well too. We don't know how deep into the snow. I don't think it was. I don't think they measured that. So that's a great question, actually, Lally. But it would have been actually a really great question for Jackson on direct. So unless we skip past that, but yeah, there is, and it makes sense. It makes sense.
That is consistent in general terms with a pedestrian collision of a shoe coming off, correct?
Again, based on the interaction between the two. I wouldn't say it's a blanket statement that, again, in all pedestrian interactions, you will have a shoe come off.
And that's not the question I was asking. So what I'm asking is it generally consistent with pedestrian collisions that a shoe may come off during the collision sequence near the area of impact?
Shoes can come off in a pedestrian impact, yes.
Yes, Lally, but not. He wants so desperately to explain because he's like, yes, but he can't do that right now. He can explain on redirect.
Again, you were testifying earlier about the damage to the Lexus being isolated in the area of the taillight, correct?
Correct.
And that was based on the information that you were providing, correct?
Correct.
Now, with respect to any of the materials that you were providing, was there anything in the materials that you were provided that indicated that just the arm or an outstretched arm of Mr. O'Keefe interacted with the vehicle?
No.
And based on your review of any of the materials that you were provided, was there any information stating that Mr. O'Keefe had been struck in the back of the head by the taillight assembly of the Lexus?
No.
And based on any of the materials, let me ask you, based on any of the materials that you provided, were you aware that Mr. O'Keefe is on video exiting from a bar minutes before crash occurs at approximately 12:11 a.m. holding a cocktail glass in his right hand?
I'm not aware of that video.
What time did he say?
That Mr. O'Keefe is on video exiting from a bar minutes before crash occurs at approximately 12:11 a.m. holding a cocktail glass in his right hand.
Is he just talking about when he left the bar, or is he talking about minutes before the crash happened? But you said it was around 12:40. I mean, that's not just minute. Like, that's just me being picky, but like at 12 there, that's like a half-hour difference. It's a 30-minute difference. That's not just minute. Minutes for me is like a few, like 3, 4, 5 minutes. Even 10 minutes feels like a little bit like, okay. Now we're getting granular with timeline. Okay. David Boreanaz has to play you in a movie.
That would be correct.
And so sort of the questions that you endeavored to answer, those were questions that you didn't know from any of the materials that you were provided. Is that correct?
If I understand your question correctly, there was nothing in the material that indicated the questions we were to answer, if that's what your question was.
That is my question. So there was nothing in there, is that correct?
Correct.
Can I have a moment, John?
Yes.
Oh, God, Lally.
Human factors, correct?
Correct.
And as far as visibility, in particular, have you ever conducted a visibility analysis?
Absolutely, hundreds of times.
And you talked a little bit about conspicuity, is that correct?
Yes.
And part of conspicuity, at least one of the factors, would be a reasonable expectation of, in particular, when you're talking about a pedestrian. Part of the conspicuity factors would include sort of a reasonable expectation that a pedestrian would be in the path of the vehicle. Is that fair to say?
I don't understand your question.
When you're talking about conspicuity or visibility analysis, in particular, you're talking about something called PRT, or perception reaction time, correct?
Well, that occurs after recognition. So first, a driver has to recognize that there's a pedestrian there before they can actually respond to it. So once they've recognized the pedestrian, then you start the perception response time where, again, the driver has identified what the hazard is. They're making a decision about what to do. They might be moving their foot from the accelerator pedal to the brake pedal. So again, kind of that's the action or the time frame in which the driver is undergoing action to potentially mitigate the collision.
And perception reaction time, that's a pretty commonly used industry sort of standard as far as crash reconstruction goes, correct?
Well, I would say that it's used in the field of action reconstruction, but as I mentioned earlier in my testimony, there isn't a blanket number in terms of perception response time. As I mentioned, it's based upon the hazard that the driver is presented with. Again, if you've got a pedestrian crossing the roadway, that's going to be one particular perception response time based upon studies and naturalistic data versus a driver suddenly stopping in front of you, right? It's not the same perception response time in every scenario.
Oh, understood. And there's different variables that may affect that as far as someone's age, as far as the lighting that's available, other things. Is that correct?
Sure.
And one of those things might be the reasonable expectation of a pedestrian being present in the roadway as you're driving along, correct?
Expectancy can play a role, yes.
Expectancy, what we're talking about, sort of the disparity or the difference between driving along a country road where there's no houses for miles and miles versus an urban area where there's crosswalks every 15 feet, correct?
Sure.
Now, in that expectation of privacy, how high would that be if we're talking about a pedestrian that actually exited from the vehicle that then strikes?
I don't understand your question.
Let me ask you this. If the operator of the vehicle has a passenger who...
Are you trying to say... Lally, are you trying to say... Now are you trying to go in the... Like, she didn't know he was behind her theory? Aren't you supposed to prove second-degree murder beyond a reasonable doubt? That seems like you're backpedaling. You're going in reverse. No, don't call anyone. Oh my God, y'all. That was hilarious. Wow, my phone just like totally woke up and said, hello, Mother Earth, I am listening to you. That was creepy. I don't know if if you guys caught that, but my phone was like, if you need me to call, like emergencies or, oh my God, that was creepy. I was like, what the heck? Losing my train of thought, that was wild. Okay, so back to David Boreanaz.
Then exits the vehicle and goes towards the back, would there be a high reasonable expectation that the pedestrian would be located in that area?
I don't know if I would classify it as high.
What would you classify it as?
I honestly don't know that I have a classification to it.
Now, you never looked at the defendant's vehicle in this case, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware that the defendant's vehicle is still in police custody and available for inspection?
I'm not aware of that.
Did you ever ask to look at the defendant's vehicle?
No.
Now, a typical pedestrian strike, for the most part, involves a pedestrian in front of a vehicle as it's coming down the street. Is that fair to say?
That can be one type of interaction, yes.
Is that more prominently seen as far as your field than a rear collision?
I would say that's fair.
And there are various types of sort of interactions.
Guys, he's freaking going with the she didn't see him. Now he's just going straight for manslaughter. Wow. Okay, we're doing this. Okay, because remember, she's charged with both second-degree murder and manslaughter. So that's what it feels like to me. He's really going for the visibility, like optics, visibility stuff. She didn't see him, which again, like why? To my knowledge, the reason why, and this again, I don't know if this is actually factor or not, but the reason she was charged with second-degree murder was because of the voicemails. If you haven't listened to the voicemails, check out my video from the other day, because I'm not like that. I'm still not understanding how that proves motive. But he is going. He's all right. We're here. We're doing it. Continue, Lally. I'm glad we're watching.
That the pedestrian can have with the vehicle in order to cause and sort of sustain injuries. Is that fair to say?
What I would say is that there's certainly, in terms of how the pedestrian interacts with the vehicle, in terms of whether they're being wrapped onto the vehicle or projected forward, certainly there's different types of interactions, yes.
So there's like a wrap and forward projection type of collision sequence, is that correct?
Those are two common, yes.
There's also something called a fender vault, is that correct?
Correct.
And sort of how or where that pedestrian is positioned with relation to the vehicle is somewhat determinative of the injury sustained, is that correct?
It can be, yes.
Obviously, you're going to see different injuries if someone fender vaults and goes over the top of the vehicle versus someone who is projected forward from the collision sequence with the front of the vehicle.
Just to clarify, again, in this matter, I was not assessing injuries. That was Dr. Rentschler. I don't have an opinion.
What I'm saying is based on your experience, so that you understand that there's a difference in the injuries that you might expect based on the type of interaction that a pedestrian has with the vehicle.
He's not going to talk about it.
And then if someone is wrapping forward, projected, and then
he's
the vehicle
looking at the car, Lally. He's not looking at the
injuries
injuries.
that you expect to see based on being overrun by the vehicle, correct?
There could be, yes.
He's not the guy, dude, to do this.
The testing that you did with respect, these are essentially experiments that you're doing, correct?
That's fair, yes.
And am I correct in saying that in scientific experiments or in the world of scientific experiments, there are certain things called variables that you're trying to account for? Is that correct?
I would say that's fair, yes.
And essentially what you're trying to do is control as many of those variables as you can in order to best replicate whatever the conditions were at the time. That,
oh my God, Lally.
Tested is that we preconditioned them.
Where in your report does it say that?
And I'm telling you, that's part of what we did for the testing.
I understand that's what your testimony is, but you wrote a report, correct?
Right, and I don't know that I detailed every single part of the test. Again, we summarized it.
Understood.
He didn't have to. That's not what the feds asked him to do. They did what the feds asked him to do. the agency. Like, why are you arguing? Like, just ask the question about the glass. You're trying to get to the glass. This is the problem with Lally, guys, is like he panders and he homes in on the wrong stuff. And then he comes off as argumentative. And it's like, yes, that obviously as a lawyer, you're trying to defend, in this case, your client is the O'Keefe family, justice for John O'Keefe, but you're coming off as like you're losing people. You're losing your people. You're losing people who are, we understand where you're going with this, so just ask the question. Ask the question.
Again, that's being projected at 37 miles per hour. Again, there would be probably minimal effects in terms of the wind.
Even if there was a blizzard going on.
Again, what we're going after here is ultimately conducting a test such that the drinking glass arrived at the location of the taillight. So if you're trying to say that, okay, he threw it this way and the wind blew it towards the taillight, sure, that could be a possibility.
And so I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just asking, are you aware that there was a blizzard and that there were wind gusts up to 37 miles per hour during the time that this collision occurred?
Was it snowing? It was snowing, guys.
Were you aware of that, sir?
I'm aware that there was inclement weather at the time, yes.
Now, with respect to what type of glass did you use?
So we used a rocks drinking glass. So that's a glass that has a thicker base and a shallower sidewall.
And so what I'm asking, so was it cocktail glass, was it pint glass? What kind of drinking glass are we talking?
A rocks drinking glass.
And how tall is that rocks drinking glass that you use?
If I had to
Do you not know what a rocks? I mean, I guess he doesn't drink. A rocks drinking glass is a whiskey glass.
I think it was about 3 or 4 inches tall, probably.
And the thickness, did you measure that as far as the thickness of the bottom of the glass?
No.
Was the thickness of the bottom of the glass thicker or more thick or less thick than the top of the glass?
Are you talking about this in comparison to the sidewall of the glass?
Talking about in comparison to itself. So you have a glass, this rocks glass. Was the bottom thicker or the top thicker?
The sidewall would be taller, if you will, than the base.
And so when you're projecting this thing out of the device that you created, the whatever it was, are you facing
the
sort of the top of the glass or
cannon, Lally, the cool cannon that I know you're jealous of because your witness didn't freaking build a cannon? Don't try like that. That's the thing I don't like about because Lally tries to come off like dicky. Like it's just it doesn't come across well, dude. Like whatever thing you built, like everybody else thinks it was cool, because it is cool. It's cool. I want you to be my dad. Like that's freaking cool. I want to play around with the cannon.
Would be sipping out of or the bottom of the glass at the tail?
So in the testing, the interaction between the taillight and the glasses was primarily between the base and the taillight.
Now, with reference to actually a little bit about the video, and you weren't aware of Mr. O'Keefe exiting from the waterfall bar at 12:11 in the morning, about 15, 20 minutes before he was struck by a vehicle. You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
Now, with reference to
Lally, that is not what you said. That's not what you said in your opening statements, and stop trying to make it seem like people aren't paying attention, because they're paying attention. It's not just people like me who can go hit the rewind button or go back to your opening statements or go back to prior testimony. The jurors are taking notes. John O'Keefe, according to your initial timeline, was not struck 15 to 20 minutes later. You said around 12:45 a.m. Last time I checked, 30 plus 11 is 12:41. So stop it. Stop it. You're foolish. Stop it. Stop trying to throw a timeline around. Stop trying to make that time. Because you know why he's saying 15 to 20 minutes now? Because Karen Reed's cell phone connected to John O'Keefe's Wi-Fi network at 12:36 a.m. So his previous timeline does not make sense anymore with that evidence. So now he's changing his timeline. He's changing his story. Stop it. Oh, that grinds my gears.
that particular establishment, was there anything stopping you or the other doctors that you were working with from going to that establishment, finding out what kind of glasses they had, getting an actual cocktail glass from that establishment?
I had no idea that video existed.
Did you even know that Mr. O'Keefe was at a bar before he was struck by the vehicle?
I believe that in one of the incident reports we reviewed that there was, I think, a narrative about that they had been at a bar drinking, yes.
How is it that you determined where on the taillight assembly to aim?
So we looked at the fracture pattern, and what it appeared to be that it was emanating from basically where the clear portion meets the red cover. We kind of saw that the fracture pattern emanated from that, so that's where we targeted it.
Now, when you did this testing, as far as the sort of breakage or the pieces that came off the taillight, is it fair to say that they were of sort of different shapes and sizes, broken pieces?
Sure.
Consistent with the broken pieces that were found on the scene near Mr. O'Keefe's body?
Yes, I would say that's fair.
The autopsy report, medical findings in regard to Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
Correct.
And the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe were primarily on the right side of his body, correct?
Correct.
So there were injuries to his right arm and forearm, elbow area, correct?
Correct.
There was bruising to his right hand. Do you recall that?
Yes.
There was an abrasion to the outside or posterior of his right leg near his knee. Do you recall that?
I don't know that I recall that off the top of my head.
And do you recall sort of the
Near
skull
his
fracture or
knee?
laceration immediately outside of the skull fracture was on sort of the right back of his head?
Yes.
Now, from the reports that you reviewed, were you aware that when Mr. O'Keefe's body was discovered by the defendant and two of Mr. O'Keefe's friends, that the defendant was the only one who could see him in the conditions?
Objection.
Sustained.
Two of his friends. Are you Lally? Karen Reed was the first one. She jumped out of the car, left her phone while she was calling John O'Keefe, recorded the voicemail of Jen McCabe in the car calling 911. Karen Reed was the one who saw John O'Keefe. Stop. And I know why you're doing it with this witness, because he doesn't know. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. But the jury knows, so stop.
As far as the lighting was concerned in that area where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, are you aware there was no overhead street ambient lighting or anything like that?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I'm not aware of that.
And you didn't do any visibility analysis or anything in relation to this case, correct?
That wasn't part of my scope in this case.
Well, as far as part of your scope, did you find that you indicated earlier that there were questions that you didn't find in the materials that you actually conducted experiments to prove or disprove, correct?
Well, again, the entity that retained us in this asked us to evaluate whether or not the damage to the vehicle and the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe were consistent with the interaction or in interaction between the two.
So you were at least somewhat restricted in the scope of what you could do based on the parameters given to you by the agency that hired you. Is that fair to say?
Sure.
The feds. The feds, the feds, the feds, the feds. If the jury knew the entity.
Now, as far as
I'm sure they're spinning their wheels being like, what?
investigating troopers
Like,
either
who
that
are these
afternoon or that morning when
agents
Mr. O'Keefe's body
that
was
hired
discovered.
them?
Were you familiar with any of those?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I'm not familiar with.
Sure.
Now we're gonna go to sidebar. I think this one's kind of a long one. It's Karen Reed's family.
Were you did you review materials, or were you made aware that the defendant said to multiple people on scene, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him"?
I'm not aware of that.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Can I have a moment, John?
Yes.
Take all the moments you need, Lally.
There's an indication that if either Mr. O'Keefe's arm or head had interacted with the taillight, there'd be some expectation that either blood or DNA would be contained on that taillight. Is that correct?
I believe yes, that was stated in the
Now
report.
he's gonna bring up
And at any point were you made aware that Mr. O'Keefe's DNA actually was recovered
you
from that taillight assembly from
this report
vehicle?
that you love
No, I was not.
throwing around.
As far as forensic reports, what, if anything, were you provided in reference to that, other than the initial crime scene report?
Are you talking about specific to the scene or forensic reports to the body?
Forensic reports specific to the evidence that was recovered from the scene and from the defendant's vehicle.
Only what would be listed in the report.
Reported data.
The crash data retrieval report, yes.
Now, were you shown anything as far as a crash reconstruction report from a trooper from the state police?
No.
And the EDR data that you observed, did that contain any sort of usable data?
There was no events recovered on the black box.
And with respect to there being no events recovered on the EDR or the black box in a pedestrian collision, is that unusual?
It is not.
And why not?
Well, because you're talking about, excuse me, a very large weight difference between the vehicle and the pedestrian. So ultimately, what the vehicle is constantly monitoring is acceleration, which gets back to a term called delta V. So when the vehicle doesn't experience a big delta V, typically the threshold for a non-deployment event where you're not firing airbags or any safety mechanisms, but the vehicle wakes up and says, hey, there was something that I potentially hit. And it's usually at a threshold of about 5 miles per hour. So again, given the weight difference, we usually don't see delta Vs that high with pedestrians.
And is that in some respects because what the EDR and what the safety restraint systems are designed to protect is the occupants of the vehicle, correct?
That's fair, yes.
I mean, there are more innovations as far as vehicles that are more modern or released earlier that have certain pedestrian or protections for other vehicles, but primarily what they're focused on is the occupants of the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Now, at any point in time, were you shown any texturing data, Toyota texturing data from the defendant's vehicle?
No.
So you weren't shown any data indicating that the defendant's vehicle was being operated in reverse.
The objection sustained. Next question.
So with regard to the defendant's statements, were you also not told that the defendant told several people that she had just gotten into a fight with Mr. O'Keefe right before she dropped him off at 34 Fairview Road?
So that's sustained.
Center of mass?
Yes.
And what kind of role does the center of mass for a pedestrian play in relation to the center of mass of a vehicle as far as how the two interact?
Well, it depends, again, on the vehicle structure. And again, when you're talking about where's the hood height, the bumper height, and the CG, or the center of gravity of the pedestrian, that, again, will kind of dictate how they interact with between the vehicle and the pedestrian.
Now, typically, the typical pedestrian collision, again, that we were speaking about before, is in relation to a pedestrian struck by the front of the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And so in a typical pedestrian collision, that involves more of an assumption of the velocity of the striking vehicle than you would see occur in sort of a side swipe. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
In a typical pedestrian collision, that would involve more of an assumption of the velocity of the striking vehicle by the pedestrian than you would see in a typical side swipe collision. Is that correct?
If I understand your question correctly, yes. If the vehicle is
Are
striking,
you trying to ask it's a side swipe between two cars versus a side swipe with a pedestrian? Is that what you're? Okay.
the center of gravity of a pedestrian as opposed to just, for instance, a limb, yes, the center of gravity of the body will be accelerated up to that speed.
Now, with respect to the defendant's vehicle, again, you never actually looked at the defendant's vehicle, is that correct?
It wasn't necessary.
And did you look at the actual taillight housing from the defendant's vehicle?
I had sufficient photographs of the taillight.
Did you ever look at the actual physical broken pieces of the taillight from the defendant's vehicle?
Again, I had sufficient photographs that documented the fragments and pieced them together.
And you're aware, at least, that the fragments that were recovered on scene were then sort of put back together and put overlay over the taillight housing that was taken from the defendant's vehicle?
Yes.
And through any of the pictures or the photos that you observed?
Taken again by who? A Canton police officer who was supposed to not be participating in
Did you ever see
investigation.
A piece of metal protruding underneath the broken and shattered plastic pieces from the taillight?
I believe it was a plastic chrome piece.
And when you were doing the testing as far as shooting the glass, the drinking glass at the taillight assembly, that taillight assembly was sort of held there by vice grips or something like that. Is that correct? It wasn't actually physically attached to a vehicle that you were shooting at?
That's correct.
He's jumping around so much. It's like giving me a headache. Like you talked about the glass, like again, sequence of events. Talk about this one thing, then move on to this thing, then go on to the next thing. Like when you jump around, it's really hard to like keep up with where the heck you're trying to go.
Now, as far as that, you're familiar with, there was a piece of a broken drinking glass that was recovered from the same area of where Mr. O'Keefe was found. Is that correct?
Amongst the fragments of the taillight, yes.
Lally, you're asking the same
Mr. O'Keefe's
question.
DNA being present on those pieces of the exterior of a broken drinking glass located near his body.
I don't believe so.
Now, as far as Mr. O'Keefe's clothing, his fingernails, are you aware that there was DNA of Mr. O'Keefe and no one else recovered from both his fingernails and from a variety of areas of his clothing?
Objection.
Sustained.
I mean, that makes sense.
Now, from the
He
crime scene
did throw the glass at her
reports, are you
taillight.
aware that there was human
If
hair?
they did fight, he threw a glass. It makes sense why there would be that DNA.
That was located on the right rear quarter panel near the dent that you were talking about?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Yes.
Are you familiar, or are you aware that subsequent mitochondrial DNA testing found that the mitochondrial DNA profile for that hair was consistent to a probability of
Oh my
99.895%
God, he's talking about
with the
the
mitochondrial DNA profile of Mr.
hair?
O'Keefe?
I'm not aware of that.
He's talking about the hair?
Now, were you also aware that the broken drinking glass with Mr. O'Keefe's DNA on it was found to be consistent with the broken drinking glass pieces that were found in the street?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Can you repeat the question?
What the? I can't. I really can't with Lally. He's so all over the place. Okay, Jackson's gonna come back up. We're gonna skip ahead. That was, I don't know if it was giving you guys a headache, but it was giving me a headache. Like he keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it was worse on this witness than it was for Dr. Sheridan. It's hard. It's so hard to follow.
Yeah.
Yes.
We would ask Dr. Andrew Rentschler to join us, please.
Oh, that was it. Okay. So I guess there was no redirect? Oh, no, he was. Let's see.
You ever, about 5:07 in the morning on January 29th, backing out of a garage and making contacts with Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle in his driveway at about 5:07 in the morning on January 29th?
No.
He's asking if that's
as far as
valid.
from your review and your testing and everything that you did in this case,
If she
if it
backed
doesn't
into
occur,
John
say,
O'Keefe's
low
car or
speed,
not.
say 1, 2, observed in this condition. So there are about 10 items that you were provided that additional information becomes available.
Very briefly, Dr. Wolfe, you were asked
here we go.
on cross-examination a couple of questions about hair, DNA on the outside of the taillight lens, I'm sorry, the taillight housing, and glass material. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Does any of that change your opinion about your opinions and conclusions in this case?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Absolutely not.
What is your conclusion as to whether or not the damage to the vehicle and the injuries to the human being are consistent or inconsistent with the vehicle interaction?
Objection.
Sustained. All right, Dr. Wolfe, you are all set, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so Dr. Wolf's done. We're going to get to Rentschler.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's his partner.
Dr. Andrew Rentschler to join us, please.
Okay.
We're going to zoom ahead. They're going to go to sidebar first because the judge had a lot to say about this witness. She said she was very concerned about this particular witness. Probably because he doesn't look like David Boreanaz, and I think she just liked looking at the other guy. So there's that. But he's the biomechanical, engineer he was talking about. Dr. Wolfe was talking about. He's this forensics guy. He's the guy who just looks at the damages that were done to the car. He doesn't look at the injuries, but he works congruently with Dr. Rentschler, who does look at the injuries. So we're going to zoom past some of his background. He's another highly qualified human being. He went to Carnegie Mellon. I remember that. He's super freaking cool too. Remember, these are the guys from ARCCA that were hired by the feds, but they're going to keep referring to it in this trial as the agency or the entity that hired them. He's got just credentials up the wazoo. So we're going to just kind of zoom past this stuff because he talked a lot about it during voir dire. Okay, so now we're going to get to actually this part.
The evidence in this case involving the Lexus, the tail light, the incident scene where the evidence was found, as well as some other documentation.
And you also worked with Dr. Wolfe, who just left the courtroom, correct?
I did, yes.
Did you two have sort of a distinct role in, although working as a team, a distinct role in making determinations and conclusions about the incident?
We did. There was a distinction. Certainly some of our work overlapped, but there was a distinction with what each of us actually did and performed with respect to this case.
Following your review and your investigation and analysis, did you make any determination as to whether any of the injuries suffered by Mr. O'Keefe in this case were consistent with producing the damage that was seen on the SUV?
I did, yes, sir.
What did you base your opinion on?
My opinion was based on certainly the medical records, the description of what the injuries were, the damage that we have to the Lexus, primarily the right rear tail light cover, as well as we performed testing to evaluate the strength of that tail light cover and look at the damage associated with different types of impacts. And also to look at the overall evidence of where everything was found, where Mr. O'Keefe was found, what the injuries were, how they may or may not have occurred based on the damage we have to the vehicle.
So did you look specifically to find whether or not you could determine the forces required for Mr. O'Keefe to suffer the injuries that you saw in the records, medical records, et cetera?
I did, yes. I determined in my analysis whether there was sufficient force with that damaged taillight and interaction with that taillight to produce any of the injuries that were listed or diagnosed in the autopsy report and the medical records.
What, generally speaking, what injuries would you expect to see in a vehicle-pedestrian interaction at, say, 24 miles per hour?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Just generally, Dr. if you would, please.
Yes, Your Honor. So 24 miles an hour, once you get up to that speed, you start to see fractures. You see significant ligament and tendon damage. I mean, usually about 15 mile an hour impact is where you start to see damage to, for instance, the leg and the knee. at that speed, you're going to produce, if you impact the vehicle, you're going to produce upwards of 1,000 pounds of force on the body, depending on what part of your body impacts the vehicle. So
that's
certainly at
exactly
25 miles an
what
hour, you start to see significant injuries.
Dr. Wolfe
Is
said.
that true for any part of the body that is struck, whether it's center mass or extremity? 1,000 pounds of force because of the speed of the vehicle?
Well, force is equal, Newton's second law of force is equal to mass times acceleration. So the acceleration is going to be the same. It depends on the mass of whatever body part's being hit. So from the testing that we did at 15 miles an hour, we used a head form, which weighs about 11 pounds. And that produced almost 1,000 pounds of force, a little under that for the head. So anything that weighs 11 pounds is going to produce almost 1,000 pounds of force. The heavier the object, if you get hit center mass, that's going to be even greater force because that's more mass than just 11 pounds. So the acceleration is the same for each body part. It just depends on the weight of the body part and how heavy it is to determine the force.
Which makes sense because, again, John O'Keefe being a large man, he's large meaning like tall, 6'2", 170, you're going to need a lot of force behind that to project him 30 feet. Whereas they're testing 11 pounds at 15 miles an hour. Yeah, that's going to go flying because it's only 11 pounds. But exactly, a grown man who is 6'2", 170 gets hit with a 7,000 ton. So again, that's why it's important to know physics, Trooper Paul, so you can properly assess the situation.
Force that's actually exerted on the body.
Did you review, in furtherance of your conclusions and opinions, did you review records that indicated injuries to both a head as well as an arm, the right extremity, right arm?
I did, yes, sir.
Taking those one at a time, is the injury to the head that you saw consistent with having been struck by a vehicle at 24 miles per hour?
It is not, no, sir.
Can you explain why that is?
There's a couple of reasons. First of all, and the main reason is
that
that to get the injury, it was a fracture at the occipital region of the head, which is basically on the back bottom part of the head. So in order to have that part of the head contacted by the taillight, you would somehow have to have a configuration or be standing in a manner that the rest of your body doesn't get hit because there's no other significant injuries to the body. If there's enough force to cause a skull fracture, then there's going to be certainly enough force to cause injury to the rest of the body. So first of all, you have to determine how could you configure somebody could actually be standing to have only the head impacted, the back of the head. And even if that was the case, if somebody positioned themselves in such a manner to have that occur, you're still going to see other injuries related to that. For instance, with the cervical spine, over 1,000 pounds of force acting on the head, you're going to get significant cervical injuries, fractures, disc injuries, tendon and ligament injuries.
Yeah.
So the fact that we only have that head injury and only damage to the occipital portion of the skull is inconsistent in this case with being struck by that tail light. And then there's also the evidence that we saw when we did the testing at 15 miles an hour where we dropped the head form. So that would be akin or like a vehicle backing up at 15 miles an hour hitting the head. We had more damage to the tail light in that test than what we saw with the subject tail light cover. So if you're going 24 or 25 miles an hour, even faster, you're going to see even greater damage, greater fracturing of that rear tail light. And we just don't have that in this case. So both the physical evidence as well as looking at the biomechanical aspects of it are inconsistent with that head injury occurring due to impact with the rear of the Lexus.
Shifting to
Mic frickin' drop. Mic drop. That's it. That's it. That's it. We have more of his testimony to go through. But that sums it up. Most of his injuries were from the face up. We're focused around this area. Yes, he had some injuries here, but there was no bruising. And again, everything they're saying, which is it's so good that they brought on, they called Dr. Sheridan first, because now that we have the medical testimony from the pathologist, everything that these guys are saying matches up perfectly. You know, if these guys were to go first and then Dr. Sheridan, it would be a little bit harder in my brain, I think, and probably for a lot of people to follow this series of events. But to say, okay, this is what I observed. This, in my opinion, my medical opinion, this is what I think could have happened, could have caused these injuries. This is definitely what wouldn't have. And then to hear the experts in that area say, yeah, no, we agree. We agree with you. So it was really great in this series of events of them calling these witnesses. I'm really happy they saved him for last.
To the arm are the same forces at play if instead of the head making contact with the taillight, it's an outstretched arm, for instance, at the elbow area of a human being, a person 73 inches tall, weighing 215 pounds.
Objection. The objection sustained. Ask me differently.
Sure.
Sorry, 215 pounds. I guess John O'Keefe was 215. I thought he was 170.
They are. I just explained force is mass times acceleration. So if the arm weighs the same as the head, you're still going to get that same force, almost 1,000 pounds.
Does the arm weigh the same as the head?
It does, actually, almost identical, because your arm, just one of your arms, including the hand, forearm, and upper arm, is about 5% of your total body weight. So for someone who weighs 216 pounds, that comes out to about 10.8 pounds. So your arm, basically your whole arm, is about the same, weighs the same as your head.
So is your analysis the same then? If the arm, close to an 11-pound arm, made contact with the taillight,
so you got a fat arm, you got a fat head.
Would you expect even more damage to the taillight at a higher speed?
Objection.
Allow it. Watch the leading.
Sure.
You yes, you would. If it's higher than 15 miles an hour and you have an arm actually striking that taillight, you're going to get.
Fucking. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I just love Bev was the one to be like leading, not even Lally. Like Lally could have been, yeah, objection, leading. Bev was like, watch the leading. Watch it. I'm watching you, Jackson. She very much like plays like the principal, like teacher vibe. But then like slap on the wrist, like doesn't really like, nobody really gets like what's the word I'm looking for? Like punished or anything like that for doing it. It's just like a slap on the wrist. It's very funny.
Even more significant fracturing, more damage to that taillight at a higher speed than what we saw.
So was the taillight damage consistent or inconsistent with striking an arm?
It was, our findings was it's inconsistent for a number of reasons, but it's inconsistent with striking the arm. Yes, sir.
Love it. Number of reasons.
Shift back to the head injury that you saw. Was the head injury that you saw consistent with falling backward from a standing position onto a rigid surface?
That's certainly one of the possible scenarios. That would create the injury mechanism. You fall backwards, strike your head on concrete. That can produce thousands of pounds of force on the head. And so that's certainly a scenario where you could produce that damage if someone was standing, they fell backwards and struck their head on the roadway or on the curb or a hard surface.
That is exactly what Dr. Sheridan said. And then Lally was like, well, what about snow on the grass? And again, I'm so surprised that he didn't call a grass like expert. or anything remotely like that to try and rebuttal this. I mean, that would have been insanely hilarious. But he's saying the same thing too. Like, yeah, it could happen from a fall, hitting concrete. You notice how he used the same exact words.
So I was going to ask, I think you may just answer my question. Those kinds of force multipliers require a hard, rigid surface or not?
They do, yes, sir.
So grass and dirt would not produce the same sort of force.
Grass and dirt, no, that would certainly not produce the same amount of force as hitting your head on concrete.
And if it was grass and dirt with a little bit of snow on the top of it, what effect is that?
That's going to dampen and lessen the force even more so.
That's exactly what Dr. Sheridan said.
Back to the arm, I know I'm going back and forth.
Exactly what he said.
Talking about the arm, if presuming a strike at say 24 miles an hour on just the arm, what kind of damage would you expect to see on the arm, irrespective of the vehicle?
You're going to see significant damage on the arm, especially if it hits at that taillight. Enough force to actually cause fracture of that taillight, that force is going to be concentrated at an initial point. And you're going to see at that point, you're going to see probably the most damage to the arm and to the skin there. So remember, at 15 miles an hour, that's about almost 1,000 pounds. So 24, 25, it's even greater. So that amount of force on the arm, certainly you're going to see extensive subcutaneous lacerations, bruising, contusions. You're going to see most likely fracture of the arm as well. You're going to see significant damage. Just imagine having your arm out and being struck by a car at 25 miles an hour. There's going to be significant damage, more so compared to simply the abrasions that were diagnosed and documented on the arm.
Oh, snap. This guy is like just, nope, going down the list. Nope. Jackson don't even have to ask him. He's like, I know what you're going to ask me. And no. It's not consistent. And it's like, it doesn't take like a professional, like it's very delightful. And I love learning this stuff. I didn't know that your arm actually weighs the same as your head. That's very cool information to learn. I don't know if you guys knew that. I did not. But it like just common sense wise, I think like even me, like before I walked into my door and like as fast, I walked into my door, hit the doorknob, and like my whole arm like just like shook with like the weird like that weird staticky feeling in your arm because like I hit a nerve and it just like ugh. But like it sucked a lot. Definitely sucked a lot. I can only imagine getting hit by a 7,000-pound SUV. What kind of feeling, like, I feel like your arm would like, and again, like this is just my brain, but I feel like your arm would like explode, like it would detach from your body, or at the very least it would like definitely dislocate your shoulder, or like definitely like something. That's just the common sense in me. And he's like, yeah, like you would see at least at the very least bruising, fractures, something, not scratches.
Arm in this case.
You did look at multiple photographs of the arm in this case, of the John O'Keefe's arm in this case, right?
I did, yes, sir.
All right. Were the injuries that you saw on John O'Keefe's right arm consistent with having been struck by a vehicle in the manner that you just described?
Objection.
That's sustained, Mr. Jackson.
You can't ask about
I did, yes.
Taking that as a hypothetical,
about John
would the injuries that you saw, generally speaking, hypothetically be consistent or inconsistent with having been struck by a car at 24 miles an hour?
Objection.
Sustained.
A reproach?
Yes.
He can't ask anything specifically related to John O'Keefe is pretty much what I'm getting at here.
You are unmuted.
Yes.
An arm was struck by a vehicle taillight traveling at 24 miles an hour or thereabouts. Would you expect to see patterned abrasions with no bruising?
Objection.
Or just what would he expect to see?
What would you expect to see?
So again, I would expect to see
This is like
significant
trying to
trauma
help
to
him
the
out.
skin, to the bone, to the tendons. I wouldn't expect to see just abrasions, pattern abrasions. I mean, abrasion by very definition means that it's trauma to the skin, which is created through rubbing or grinding or friction. So it's basically something rubbing against the skin that basically wears away that top layer of skin. It's not blunt force trauma. If you have blunt force trauma, that produces a contusion or a bruising. It's not a laceration type injury where you have a cutting injury that actually produces a cut or a significant laceration.
Which
It's really just
Dr.
rubbing along the skin.
Sheridan
So
said
that
all
would be
that.
inconsistent. If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles an hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, especially if there's a taillight that shatters. So you have the taillight coming in, it's hitting the arm, and it's moving forward into the arm. So if that actually caused fracturing of the taillight, then parts of that taillight are going to be pushed into the arm and likely embedded into the arm as the vehicle continues forward and pushes the arm out of the way.
Yes.
I didn't see any of that. Basically just superficial abrasions, which all appear to have a similar amount of force. There's not a difference. That's the other thing. If you had a taillight shatter and explode on an arm, you would have some areas where you would have very deep contusions or lacerations, others lighter areas. But when you look at the abrasions that were noted in this case, they all appear to be the same force, generally the same direction and the same severity, which would be inconsistent, in my opinion, with being struck at 25 miles an hour.
Boom. Again, like mic drop after mic drop, man. Dr. R. Alfred Molina. Like I would love to do like a side by side of like his testimony and Sheridan's testimony because they like verbatim same exact thing. The same exact thing. Especially like when he's talking about the abrasions on John O'Keefe's arm. I'm going to back it up so you guys can hear that again, but they all look like the same patterns. They all look like they're going in the same direction. That's exactly what Dr. Sheridan said.
That would be inconsistent. If you have an arm that's actually struck at 25 miles an hour, you're going to have significantly greater damage, especially if there's a taillight that shatters. So you have the taillight coming in, it's hitting the arm, and it's moving forward into the arm. So if that actually caused fracturing of the taillight, then parts of that taillight are going to be pushed into the arm and likely embedded into the arm as the vehicle continues forward and pushes the arm out of the way. I didn't see any of that. Basically just superficial abrasions, which all appear to have a similar amount of force. There's not a difference. That's the other thing. If you had a taillight shatter and explode on an arm, you would have some areas where you would have very deep contusions or lacerations, others lighter areas. But when you look at the abrasions that were noted in this case, they all appear to be the same force, generally the same direction and the same severity, which would be inconsistent, in my opinion, with being struck at 25 miles an hour.
Generally speaking, do you look for consistency in size of an object striking a body and the injury that the body suffers from being struck by the object?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, size is a big part of it, certainly. Yes.
So did you do any measurements of the size of the taillight, the width of the taillight that was shattered?
Yes.
And what was that width? If you can recall?
I think the width we looked at was maybe 6 inches or so.
Consistent with Wolfe.
In coming to your opinions and conclusions, did you look at the arm of John O'Keefe just sort of laid out, straight out?
I did, yes, sir.
Did you see where the injury started and stopped, or began and ended, however you want to put it, in terms of size? Yes,
I mean, it started from the upper arm and then extended down into the forearm, which was greater than 12 inches of length, where you see those injuries and those abrasions occur.
Did you come to any conclusions or opinions concerning the size differential between the taillight and the injuries that you see?
Objection.
Sustained.
Generally speaking, would you expect if there was an injuring event that the size of the injury would be consistent with the thing that produced the injury?
Yes, generally speaking, you would certainly expect that. And again, you would normally and usually be able to see an initial point of contact because that's where the most force is going to occur, where it causes that taillight to break. So you would have an area of severe damage, and then it would extend out likely to the edges of where it would contact the rest of the taillight.
From a biomechanics and or a physics standpoint, engineering standpoint, is it reasonable if someone is standing with their arm extended to be hit by a moving vehicle at say 25 miles an hour and the center mass of the body to be projected?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
Is it consistent in your view with engineering principles and physics principles that you know if an arm is hit, extended, not the body, just the arm is struck, for the body then to be projected?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
It's not, no. So if we have contact, your arm's out, we have contact to the arm. I mean, first of all, it's a ball and socket joint. So the arm can move independently of the rest of the body. So with enough force, even if you're contracting your arm and trying to hold it out as tight as possible, it's going to overcome that muscular contraction and basically just move the arm.
Yeah.
But secondly, it all depends on your center of mass. The center of mass is kind of the equilibrium point of your body of where your weight's distributed. And for most normal people, the center of mass occurs at your umbilicus or your belly button. So wherever your belly button goes, that's where your body's going to move. They teach this to football players, right? If you're a defensive back and a running back comes around the corner and it's you against him, they tell them or they teach them to watch the waist and watch the belly button. It doesn't matter what your head or your arms do or what their feet do. Wherever their belly button goes, that's where they're going to go. So that's what you want to tackle. So even if you had your arm straight out, again, we said it would move because of the joint. But let's assume you had a metal pole sticking out of your arm, out of your body instead of your arm, and that metal pole gets hit. What's going to happen to your body? It's just going to spin around, right? Because it's producing a moment arm, which produces a torque on the body. So your body's going to basically spin. In order to get that body, or the complete body, over, for instance, 10, 20, 30 feet into the yard, you need a force acting at the center of mass. You need an external force pushing the body that way. And that's not going to happen if you just hit the arm. It's not enough force. It's not the right mechanism to actually cause the body to somehow move that far over.
Assuming that a body...
Yeah, like, he could do the closing argument. Like, I mean, no disrespect to Jackson or Yannetti, but like, my God. He knows. He's like trying to help out Jackson as best as he can by like using general terms, like not specific to John O'Keefe, but 10, 20, 30 feet. So, and he explains it in a way that's just so easy and like interesting to understand, giving analogies like, hey, like a football player, like, why do you think? And like, this is what a great analogy, because this is Boston. It's Boston. It's New England. Patriot land, right? Patriots. Go Pats. I'm not a football person, so. But I know that's the New England football team, and he's playing to that audience. Like, I'm sure there's some people on the jury who are football fans, and they're like, oh yeah, like, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, why do you think they're always, every play, when they're tackling, they teach them to tackle like that, not to tackle the arm, because they still have the rest, they have the control of the rest of their limbs, the rest of their body. It's not the center of mass. You get the center of mass, they go flying, they go down. You explain that to a football head, and by football head, I mean a football fan, not disrespectfully, don't come after me now. They're gonna get it. So he's a smart mofo. He is playing to the right. He knows the audience he's playing to. He knows.
Was struck with enough force at center mass to project that body 20, 30 feet. What injuries would you expect to be produced on that body?
Objection.
If you did have a body that was projected a distance, what injuries from a car, what injuries would you expect to see on the body?
Objection.
I'm going to see you at sidebar the last time on this.
Last time on this, because the judge is like, come on, this is the last witness. Let's go. Like, let's wrap the day up. And also, too, like, come on, Lally. Like, he can't, like, what? Like, you can't block him for everything. He's got to be able to answer something. So that was a quick one.
May I interrupt?
Yes.
Doctor, do you have my question in mind? You need me to repeat it?
Maybe repeat it, yeah.
Easy for you to say.
So he won.
Assuming that a body was struck center mass with enough force from a vehicle traveling at whatever speed to project the body off the
So he's not, so he won with the amendment of he can't speak specifically to 30 miles an hour. Not 30 miles an hour, excuse me, 30 feet.
Would you expect to find injuries on that body?
You would, and you would actually see that there's specific injuries, because let's say you're standing forward and you get hit on the right side with a vehicle. you're going to get injuries and damage to the right side of the vehicle as that vehicle impacts you. It depends on the profile of the vehicle, where how high the hood comes up, whether you're going to wrap up onto the hood, or if it's a van or the back of an SUV, it will project or push your entire body to the left. So you're going to get initial contact and injuries to the right side of your body. And then if it propels you into the air, you're going to get airborne, and then you're going to contact the ground, usually with the left side of your body.
Yeah.
So then we're going to see a correlation of injuries to the left side of your body as it slams down onto the ground as well. And at those speeds, normally you would also see more abrasions, greater abrasions or road rash along the entire part of the body, as your body then would slide until it came to the point of rest.
And you did not see that in this case.
Objection.
You have money on?
Yes.
Mr. Lally? That's it. Now Lally's up.
Good afternoon.
Now, you, in conjunction with the other doctors on your team that conducted the analysis and testing in this case, you wrote a report, is that right?
We did, yes, sir.
And that report, excuse me, was issued on February 12th, 2024, is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
And within the first paragraph of that report, the last two sentences state, this analysis is based on information currently available to ARCAA and is only to be only to be issued in its entirety. However, ARCAA reserves the right to supplement or revise this report if additional information becomes available. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes, sir.
Now, the information that you received and that you reviewed either individually or as a team, that included some state police reports, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Some Canton Police Department reports, correct?
Yes.
Some scene photos, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Medical examiner dispatch removal report, is that right?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Some videos from the location of 34 Fairview Road, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Some photographs of the defendant's vehicle, the 2021 Lexus LX 570, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Photographs of evidence that was recovered from the scene, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
CDR reports from the defendant's Lexus.
Yes, sir.
And then essentially there were some other materials, whether they be literature or other things that you and your team of other doctors reviewed over the course of formulating your opinions in this case, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Now,
This is the better way to start off, Lally, is by going through for what did you review? Cool. This is what you reviewed. Now that you have that in mind, let's go through everything down this list one by one. That is the better way to do it. I hope he does do it because my God, it is so hard to keep track of what the heck he is trying to ask half the time. I know we're in the last hour. We're in the final hour. He's sweating. He's got to bring it home. But that's for closing arguments, and we'll see. I cannot wait for closing arguments, especially from Lally, because I want to hear about the timeline that he finally decides on. So, oh boy, let's get back into this testimony and wrap it up. What do you say?
in regard to evidentiary materials that indicates within the report that were reviewed, you talk about the lens cap to the taillight assembly, photographs of that nature, and then there's a mention of a black straw that was found on scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
There's no mention in the report of either Mr. O'Keefe's shoe or his hat, correct?
Yes.
You are muted.
Oh yeah, he's gonna ask about the shoe flying again. I don't see how the shoe flying is necessarily relevant for this witness, just because again, he's here to talk about the injuries, not really about like the missing pieces of I'd be more curious to hear about what he has to say about the glass, because Jackson didn't get into that. So I don't know where he's going with the shoe, but we're at sidebar, so wow, it's a long sidebar. Karen's like, yo, I'm like freaking tired.
You need a couple minutes, Mr. Lally, or do you need a minute?
No, you're fine. Ron. Take it up.
I guess he's not gonna ask that. He needs a few.
Yes.
Doctor, are you familiar with a term called compression abrasions?
He
Compression
needed a hot
abrasions?
minute.
Yes.
And am I correct when I say compression abrasions are essentially when direct pressure from a blunt object together with slight rubbing movements produce skin and epidermal crushing? Is that what your understanding of the term is?
Yes, sir.
And you're familiar with patterned abrasions?
I am, yes.
And patterned abrasions are injuries that show a distinct pattern that may reflect the shape of the impacting blunt objects that you may see with reference to injuries that are left by that blunt object. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Now, as far as in general terms, from what you reviewed, at any point in time did you look at a state police reconstruction report?
I don't believe that I did, no, sir.
You weren't provided with that, is that correct?
That's correct. I don't believe so.
You weren't provided with any sort of forensic reports, DNA or anything like that, is that correct?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
And you never actually looked at the physical car, is that correct?
I did not. That's correct.
Are you aware that the physical car, being the defendant's car, is still in law enforcement custody and available for inspection if you had wanted to? Are you aware of that?
I think I'm aware of that, yes, sir.
You never made that request, is that correct?
That was not necessary in this case to inspect the vehicle.
But it was necessary or not, you didn't make that request, correct?
I don't remember if we made that request or not. We obviously didn't look at the vehicle, but it wasn't necessary in this case.
Did you ever look at the actual taillight pieces or the taillight housing? Is that correct?
Not the actual. We looked at photographs of the evidence. Yes.
Now, the injuries that you observed or reviewed in materials in regard to Mr. O'Keefe were primarily on the right side of his body. Is that correct?
Well, sir, on the right arm, in the posterior aspect of the right arm, yes. And then the skull fracture was a little bit to the right, the occipital fracture.
Also bruising on his right hand. Is that correct?
There was bruising on the back of his right hand, yes.
The dorsal aspect?
Yes, correct.
And there was also bruising on sort of the posterior of his right knee. Is that correct?
There was a small bruise, I believe, yes, sir.
A small bruise. He's trying to, like, no, the bumper didn't hit the small bruise. Karen probably kicked him in her sleep one night.
Now, with respect to within your report, you talk about the numerous linear abrasions on the posterior of Mr. O'Keefe's right arm and forearm, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in relation to those injuries, there's a sentence in which you or whoever authored this part of the report, I'm assuming it's you, indicate that furthermore, any such injuries would be highly improbable if Mr. O'Keefe was wearing a jacket, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that Mr. O'Keefe was not wearing a jacket other than a long sleeve sort of hooded shirt?
I believe that came to light afterwards. Again, it doesn't affect my actual opinions in this case, but it was a sentence added in there, yes, sir.
And so also within your report, same paragraph, you indicate blood and DNA transfer would also be highly probable under such circumstances, none of which were reportedly found on the tail lamp assembly or any of the fractured pieces, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware that DNA consistent with that of Mr. O'Keefe was actually found on the tail light housing from the defendant's vehicle?
I'm aware after we wrote or issued the report that it became known to us that I believe DNA was tested and some DNA was found, I believe a small amount. I don't believe any blood evidence was located or found on any pieces, but there was indication of DNA on the tail light housing.
Be correct.
There was also DNA matching Mr. O'Keefe that was found on the exterior of a piece of drinking glass that was found right near his body.
I believe so, yes, sir.
And there was also pieces of approximately 1/16 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch of clear and red plastic that was subsequently found to be consistent with the defendant's taillight that was found embedded within Mr. O'Keefe's shirt.
Within the shirt, I believe, yes, sir. Not his actual body.
And so this is all things that you found out after you issued your report in February of 2024, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Now, when you were talking about the injuries to the back of the head of Mr. O'Keefe, consistent with coming in contact with a hard
Again,
surface,
like
correct?
now, more and more, it really does make sense. Like ever since Dr. Wolfe, David Boreanaz, you put this in my head now because now I keep thinking like maybe John O'Keefe did like throw a glass at the taillight, and that's how like the pieces of taillight like ended up embedded. I'm just like, or they were planted, but that makes more sense to me.
Yes, sir.
Would that hard surface include if the ground was frozen?
Well, you'd have
Oh
to perform an analysis actually, because you'd have to determine how hard that ground was. You'd have to look at the freeze and thaw cycle, probably leading up to weeks of that. You can't just look at ground and say, well, it's below freezing, so that ground must be frozen. I mean, is it a possibility? It may be, but you have to go through an actual analysis and procedure to determine how hard that ground is and whether it could have produced those injuries.
So it is something that's capable of being done by you, is that correct?
Performing that type of an analysis? You could go through and do it, sure, yeah.
And you didn't do it, correct?
No, I did not do it, no, because yeah, there's no need in this case. We don't know what happened in this case. There's no indication of, certainly it's not consistent with getting hit by the car and ending up where he did, even if the ground is somehow hard enough to cause that type of an injury. Again, there's no movement and no force to get his body over there, and the damage with the car is inconsistent with him being struck by it. So whether the ground could cause it or not, the roadway could cause it, the curb could cause it, a back could cause it. There's numerous different possibilities, and we don't really have enough evidence in this case to determine what one specific event actually caused that injury.
I mean, that's the closing argument. That's the closing argument. Like that is like he did your job for you, you guys. Like you didn't even like he's so matter of fact too, and like he's not trying to like throw shade at Lally, but he's like, yeah, no, man, like it's not what happened. It's not what happened. Like he just shut everything down. That was amazing. That was amazing. Yeah, Alfred Molina. I got a clip. That was good. That was damn. Damn, that was really good. I gotta write it down because otherwise I'm gonna forget when I'm trying to timestamp every. But like, wow. Thanks for tying that all up for us. I mean, we were already there, but thank you. Somebody who's smart and educated, just saying what was already on everybody's mind.
You didn't have enough evidence based on what you were provided. Isn't that fair to say?
No.
I didn't have enough evidence based on what I was provided, and even looking at the additional evidence that I became aware of after the fact, there's still no evidence. I mean, you can't deny the science and the physics as to what would have happened if he was struck by the vehicle. So anything past that, you have to somehow overcome that hurdle, which is very difficult to do.
When was it that you looked at this additional material
Shut
you provided?
that down.
We were informed after a report was issued that DNA was found, and that was really the primary issue. I believe that some DNA was found on the housing, which again, there's numerous explanations or ways that DNA can get on a light housing.
Let me ask you this, sir. With regard to the materials that you were provided with,
Lowley's so
is there
mad
anything in
too.
there that
Exactly.
stated that
Like,
Mr.
yeah,
O'Keefe's
just
skull fracture on the back of his head was caused by contact with the killer?
No,
Wait,
I don't believe there was anything
wait,
in those
wait.
materials that
Is
stated
there
that.
anything in the cause of it?
Wait.
It can get on a primary issue. I believe that some DNA was found on the housing, which again, there's numerous explanations or ways that DNA can get on a light housing.
Let me ask you this, sir. With regard to the materials that you were provided with, was there anything in there that stated that Mr. O'Keefe's skull fracture on the back of his head was caused by
Skull
contact with the
fracture.
killer?
I thought he said like celebrate. I was like, wait, what? Okay. Skull fracture. Got it.
No, I don't believe there was anything in those materials that
Is
stated
there
that.
anything in those materials that indicated, or that anyone stated at any point in time that Mr. O'Keefe's arm was outstretched at the time that he was struck by the vehicle?
No, sir, there wasn't.
Was there anything in there indicating that his arm was tucked in at the time that he was struck by the vehicle?
You know, there's no indication in any of that evidence of what he may or may not have been doing, how he may or may not have been positioned. I mean, that's the whole issue. There's no evidence to indicate what may have allegedly occurred in this case.
Now, typical pedestrian collision
He's
that
like,
you see
dude,
through the
I'm
course of your
trying
work
to
involves
tell you,
a
why
pedestrian
are
being
you
struck by the
doing
front
it?
of a vehicle. Is that fair to say?
Throw in the towel.
I see all types of different people getting run over backwards, cars spinning, hitting sideways, frontal impacts certainly occur, yes, but we see pedestrians getting struck by all parts of the vehicle.
I'm sure you see all kinds. What I'm asking is predominantly when you see a pedestrian collision, the typical pedestrian collision would be a pedestrian crossing a road in front of a vehicle as it's approaching. Is that correct?
That's certainly not uncommon, yes, sir.
Now, as far as I believe you described a little bit on your direct testimony, as far as there's differences in the type of injuries that you would expect or anticipate depending on how the vehicle interacted with the pedestrian in a pedestrian collision, correct?
Yes, sir.
And as far as you're familiar with what's called the sideswipe collision?
Yes, sir, I am.
Oh
Am I
boy.
correct when I say that in a typical pedestrian collision with a pedestrian crossing in front of a vehicle, there are a number of different types of interactions as far as a wrap and a forward projection versus a fender vault versus a number of different ways that a pedestrian can interact with the front of a vehicle, correct?
It depends on the position of the pedestrian and certainly the profile of that vehicle and the speed of the vehicle. Yes, sir. There's many different factors involved in it.
And so in a typical pedestrian collision, when a pedestrian is struck by the front of the vehicle, that involves more of an assumption of the velocity of the striking motor vehicle by the pedestrian than you would expect to see in a sideswipe collision, correct?
Well, I mean, yes, generally speaking, a sideswipe means that the person or the pedestrian in the vehicle don't obtain a similar or common velocity. So if you're standing in front of a car and it hits you, it's going to speed you up to that same speed and then disengage. The sideswipe means that there's not this mass-to-mass impact. By its very nature, sideswipe has minimal forces. We see it even between vehicles that just rub against each other. So if there's a sideswipe impact with a pedestrian in a vehicle, there's going to be very little damage to the pedestrian. And similarly, there's going to be very little movement. There's really no force at all acting. You know, for instance, if a car came and swiped by your arm, but didn't have enough force or enough contact to cause any damage, well, it wouldn't actually cause any movement of the person either. So a sideswipe by its very nature involves minimal impact, minimal forces, minimal velocities.
What? So he just said, he's like, okay, I see where you're going with this, Lally, but even though there might be minimal injuries, there might not be bruising, there might not be this, there might not be that, even though he said, obviously, based on what he just said about if John O'Keefe's arm was, you know what I'm saying, holding up his arm like this with the glass in his hand and he was hit, he was struck, there would have been movement to the arm. Not necessarily there would have been a little bit of movement here, but not the whole center of mass. So that being said, he is now saying that if it was a true side swipe as what we believe to be a side swipe, there would have been minimal injuries, but it wouldn't have been enough force to have projected him several feet, like 30 feet.
It also contained in the report that you at least co-authored, there's an indication that Mr. O'Keefe's injuries, at least to his skull, the fracture to his skull, are consistent with him having been pushed or possibly been impacted by the subject Lexus and fallen backwards, striking his head. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, so that's another possibility.
Sorry, sir, yes or no?
No, let him answer. Let him answer the question.
So if we're saying that there's enough force if you fall backwards to strike your head and cause that skull fracture, well, he could have slipped and struck his head. The car could have backed up and not known that he was there and nudged him and caused him to fall. I mean, any event that would cause him to fall backwards obviously would result in him striking his head. So there's numerous, almost infinite possibility of different scenarios that could result in that type of an event.
30 feet.
Mr. Jackson? Okay. Dr. Rentschler, you are all set, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
How's I mean, I don't think I recalled him actually redirecting. But yeah, that's wow.
I want to see counsel for the last time it's by right now.
For the last time. So like I said in the beginning of the video, Karen Reed did not testify. She did not take the stand. She did not need to. Especially that was like a shutdown.
Thank you, Your Honor. With that, if it rests.
Okay. Jurors, that is
Yes,
the evidence in this
thank
case.
you.
After all these weeks, that's the evidence that you will hear in this case. The lawyers and I still
Look how happy she is. She's like, that is it. Everybody's done. Like, look how happy she is. Bev is like, thank God.
work to do for tomorrow. But tomorrow morning, we will have closing arguments of counsel. They'll get an hour apiece to be able to argue this case to you. I'll instruct you in the law, and then 12 of you will begin your deliberations sometime tomorrow. Okay, so with that, please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, please disregard it. Let us know. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, to the court, please.
He's a lot better at 1.5 speed, by the way, y'all. And I think they talk about, is it in this video? I guess not. I know Emily D. Baker, during her live stream today, she went through, like, there was what is it called? My brain. What is the brain? Going through what the, like, jury instruction. So that's what she was talking about, the tail end of that. Jury instruction, what they can consider, etc. When they're looking at the evidence, what they can't consider, etc. So that was it. That was it. We have closing arguments. When I'm posting this, it'll be today. I know I'm talking in a lot of different tenses, future tenses, past tenses. As I'm recording this is midnight, close to 1 a.m. On the 25th. So literally in a few hours, they're going to be doing closing arguments. She said an hour each a piece. So we'll do a full video breakdown of that. But I have a very strong feeling that if they start court early, if they start around the same time that they've been starting and they each get an hour, I mean, Lally's probably going to run out. He's probably going to take like 2 or 3 hours. Let's be real. I'd be surprised if he could condense it down to an hour, but we'll see. Hopefully he can. Hopefully he can do it. Because the sooner they get the closing arguments in, the sooner we get a verdict. I don't think it's going to take long. I don't think it's going to take more than a couple of hours, if that. I mean, that what a great way to end end the trial on just such a mic drop moment. That was a mic drop moment. What a great witness. What a great expert. All three of them, boom, boom, boom. They're all aligned with exactly what they were saying. So, and it's fresh. It's fresh in the jury's minds. So they're going to be thinking about that all night. They've already started their deliberation mentally in their brains, I'm sure. Probably for weeks now. But now that they know, all right, like verdict time, like here we go. I don't see a world where she gets convicted of anything. There's so much reasonable doubt. And when you're getting unbiased outside parties like this, commenting on things like that, like Dr. Rentschler, somebody who wasn't hired by the defense, he's not paid to be there, as Jackson said, and he agreed. He's not being paid to be there by the defense, by the feds, the entity, the agency, but not the defense. So, holy smokes. I mean, it was a long one. This was another long one, but it was a good one. We started with Turtleboy, his assault. I mean, we'll be following that and seeing, what if anything there is to follow up with that. Hopefully the charges do stick. Hopefully they're not dropped against Jill Daniels and Jim. I wanted to say Davies again. Jim Ferris, part of the McAlbert Mafia, as he likes to call it, the McAlberts. Then we dove into Dr. Sheridan's testimony. He was the pathologist for the defense. Then we got into Dr. Wolfe, David Boreanaz. He was the forensic expert, the guy who assessed the damages that could have been done to Karen Reed's car if she struck John O'Keefe with her vehicle. And then we ended the show. I mean, what a great witness. Oh, he was so great to watch. Dr. Rentschler, great testimony. He was the other side of ARCAA, the other part of the duo with Dr. Wolfe, where he had to assess the injuries that could, if anything, if they were if they were caused by a motor vehicle accident. So lots of stuff. Again, I think we might get a verdict tomorrow, and if so, like, oh my, I can't believe this. I mean, I just started this channel literally a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and it just, the case, what I've been learning throughout this trial, it's been incredible. It's been so interesting, so fascinating. I've learned so much. I hope you guys have too, those of you who have been on this ride with me over the last few days. I know we jumped in late, but what I plan on doing for the next few cases is, again, just more of the same, following trial coverage from day one. I'm thinking about maybe diving into the Adelson case. That was a case that I was deeply ingrained with back in November when Charlie Adelson was convicted, found guilty of I think it was first degree. I have to look at this exactly what he was convicted of, but he's been sentenced to life in prison. He's serving his sentence. Donna Sue Adelson, she was picked up as well a few weeks later. I think like right around Thanksgiving. She was picked up. She's currently in jail. She's set to go to trial in September. So I'm thinking maybe I'll cover that in between the Baldwin case, and then by the time Donna starts her trial, we'll be all caught up to speed. But let me know what you guys think. I'll definitely be following up more with this case. I mean, it's not over. Even when Karen Reed is found not guilty, clearly, there's still the federal investigation that's going to be going on. There's all the stuff with Turtleboy that's going on. So there's plenty of stuff to come. But if there are trials, cases, stuff you guys want me to dig into, please let me know. I'm even going to look at more local cases to me and where I live as well too, just so I can get a little bit more boots on the ground. But this is really what sparked my whole fascination with this stuff. And this case, and I can't believe that we're here. It's absolutely insane to me. And I'm looking forward to the post-trial coverage as well too. So if you like this video, please hit you can tell it's super late at night. I am like totally brain dead at this point. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the notification bell to receive all alerts from yours truly if you never want to miss another video from me, as well as hitting the like button or just commenting on the video if you want to have a discussion about the stuff. You have thoughts, opinions. That's what this is for. This is a court of public opinion, right? Trial by media. We're not lawyers. We're not experts. We're not medical professionals. We're not law enforcement. We're just people who want to understand how all of that stuff works so that we know how to protect ourselves. We know how to take better care of our loved ones. We know how to make this world a better place. Because that's the problem, is that people, I mean, yes, you learn this stuff in history class when you're a kid and you don't care and you're not paying attention. But then when you enter the real world and as an adult and you have to consider all these things, how many of us really have a deep understanding of how our law works and our rights? I think it's so important, and that's why I'm just so committed to producing more and more content like this on this channel, because I'm learning in real time and I want to learn more with you guys. And the more information you can share with me, that's really what this is all about, is so that we can just grow together, learn together, and again, make this world just a better place to live in overall. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one for closing arguments.